let me say something in relation to our conference. Right behind me, you see the roll-up that is a marketing tool for our program, the Ecumenical Lublin of 2020, People and Forms of Dialogue toward Jerusalem. We also see the sponsors of this program, the municipality, as well as the region or province of Lublin. We are awaiting Rabbi Shudrik to join us, and Bishop Rafał Markowski as well. These two are about to join us. Let me also remind all of you that I have provided you with links with the interpretation, and the interpretation is available through the second device that you have been provided with. So if you do wish to take advantage of the interpretation, welcome to Rabbi Walter Homolka, joining us this very moment.
If you can hear the interpreters, we can see that Bishop Rafa is already listening to the interpreters. If you can hear us, could you please give us a sign, like thumbs up or anything, that you can hear the interpretation? We would like to know whether interpreting is working, but it should be working. At the moment, so Rabbi is writing to us at the moment that he is unable to join us and connect up for some reason. This is the interpreting channel where there is going to be interpretation. To jest kanał z tłumaczeniem. Tutaj będzie słychać jedynie tłumaczenie, natomiast wizja audio i wideo jest w pokoju głównym. This is the channel where there is going to be only interpretation into Polish and English respectively. And so I thought to myself that without such technical possibilities, says Father Szczerbiński, if we didn't have the technological possibilities we had now, then we would have been stuck even more. Yes, it has been said that there are many apartments, many possibilities in heaven, and now we can see that there are many different apartments and lodgings available around the world. Dzień dobry wszystkim. So there's going to be a more direct program. We wouldn't have had such issues if we just met in the aula. At the moment we cannot have big gatherings. That's why we cannot do it in person. That is true. So we're still waiting for some people. I can see that they have entered, but we are waiting for Rabbi Homolka, but we are still waiting for Rabbi Shudrik, who is supposed to open the conference. It may happen that there is a long queue of people trying to enter. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall ask everyone to mute their microphones. So I have muted everyone now. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still waiting for Rabbi Michael Shudrik, who is to open our conference, but he's having issues with entering the conference. So I shall start speaking, but I hope that Bishop Rafał Markowski and Rabbi Michael Schudig shall join us soon. But let us start, because time has no mercy and we have to go according to schedule. My name is Sławomir Jacek Żurek. I work at the Lublin Catholic University. I run the program that this conference is part of as well, which is Ecumenical Lublin 2020, the people and dialogue forms towards Jerusalem. We started our program in 2017 with an international ecumenical congress that took place in Lublin on the 700th anniversary of Lublin becoming a city. And at the same time, it was 500 years of Reformation and 100 years, so a centenary of the Catholic University in Lublin. It was Sławomir Pawłowski who directed and hosted the whole Congress. Greetings to him. And then for 2 years, the program was run as monthly meetings organized together with meetings or ecumenical debates. I would like to once again greet everyone and let you know that our conference is preparing us for an important experience which is going to take place next year. It is going to be the second International Ecumenical Congress that's going to take place in Jerusalem between the 23rd and the 25th November 2021, which is going to be entitled Lublin, Jerusalem, the Cities of Dialogue, because Lublin used to be called Jerusalem of the Kingdom of Poland. We would like to also refer to that tradition and organize this Congress in a city that is a place where dialogue is very important. That is Jerusalem, that's Lublin, but that's also all over the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start our meeting with the sponsors. One of them is the city of Lublin, and in just a moment, on behalf of the president of our city, Dr. Krzysztof Żuk, that the director of the department for international cooperation of our city, Mr. Krzysztof Stanowski, extends his greetings. Afterwards, the deputy marshal of our voivodeship is going to take the floor, Mr. Wojciechowski. So we are still waiting for Bishop Markowski and Rabbi Michael Schudig. And so we would like Mr. Stanowski to take the floor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of President Krzysztof Żuk. We are actually in a very special moment. I'm very sorry that our president cannot be present because our city council has gathered. And this is also the moment when the president, the mayor, together with all of the deputy mayors are very busy and they are at the disposal of the city council. I am sorry, I'm not feeling my best. But of course, I'm connecting from home, just like everyone else. We are on the journey towards Jerusalem. And so it seems that it's a very special moment when, on the one hand, this reality is trying to push us into different ghettos in which we used to be separated. This dialogue, this conversation, this meeting is especially important. I can recall the beginning of the martial law in Poland when Björk Ziegler was together with me. We went to a seminar organized by Władysław Bartoszewski. He researched the German documents and sources, what was being written about underground press. And all of a sudden we've got martial law, and I meet Ziegler somewhere in town. He's in a hurry and he says, Krzysztof, I thought that it was only science, but it's really important. And so today, when during this period of many conflicts and protests, we see that people reach out for authorities and as well as clergy, as spiritual persons of different denominations. And I believe that this is a special moment when what we are doing and what we do, it is not just science. It is something that can really help us to go through this very difficult time. So once again, on behalf of our president, I would like to thank you for this initiative. And once again, I would like to say I'm sorry for his absence. Thank you very much, Director, for this warm welcome. And now, Marshal Wojciechowski, please take the floor. I would also like to welcome you to this meeting. It is a great pleasure for me to be able to participate yet again in the meeting regarding dialogue. But it's dialogue and tolerance. These values have always been very dear to me, especially dialogue. That is this path to understanding each other, to concord, to peace. I would like to thank Professor Żurek for organizing such debates, such meetings. On behalf of the Marshal of the Lubelskie Voivodeship, Mr. Stawiacki, as well as the entire board, and I am also a member of the Council of the local parliament of our voivodeship, I feel proud that I can represent the Council of the Lubelskie Voivodeship. I would like to greet all of the participants, wish you a fruitful debate, and whenever I participate in such debates, I recall the first state of Poland, the first Republic of Poland, where it was commonly agreed upon that the commonwealth of both of two nations, it was an asylum, it was a sanctuary for other religions, and it was very tolerant, whereas other countries were very cruelly dealing with those who thought in a different way, or they also practiced a different religion. A person who is tolerant is a person who understands other people and is understanding towards others. It is respecting the feelings of other people and tastes of other people, and first of all, other religions and traditions connected with them. I am really happy that it is in our cities, in the capital of the Lubelskie Voivodeship, such debates are taking place. However, it is worth mentioning today, when there is so much unrest, not only connected with this pandemic, but also with being a believer in different religions, different ideologies. At least for me, there is a new problem that emerges, that persons of other religions, other ideologies that fight for their rights, whether such persons fighting for this tolerance, whether those persons are tolerant towards ourselves, our values, our religion that we represent. And maybe, Professor, there will be a moment that the answer to this question will be actually discussed. Maybe one of the panelists will also refer to it. Maybe I will find the answer myself. I wish you a fruitful discussion. And recently, when I have visited the Crown Tribunal, we said that yes, at the moment we are in Lublin, but next time in Jerusalem, this is where we shall meet to continue this dialogue, to talk about tolerance, understanding for the others. And I do wish us that we can meet as quickly as possible in Jerusalem and in other places where tolerance and dialogue are acknowledged and very much desired. I would like to wish you all the best, especially health, because this is something that we lack at the moment very often. And I wish you a fruitful debate. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marshall, for this warm welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Michael Schudrich is with us over the phone, and maybe it will be possible to hear what he's saying. I can hear you. I hope that you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yes, I can see that you are audible. I have run meetings over Teams many times, but today there is a problem. In the weeks that we are reading Torah at the moment, this is Toldot, and this is Hi Sarah. Yezal, Isaac Ishmael, representing the Jewish nation, Judaism. Ishmael represents Islam. And we are talking now about Isaac and Esau. And so Jacob represents Judaism, but Esau represents Christianity. And so we can see that right from the beginning, there has been tensions between Yaakov and Esau. So for us, it is also an example that this tension had been there right from the beginning. That the tension had been there, but then it was also possible with the Torah that next it was possible to be in a good contact. So this is where the way it used to be 2,000 years ago. There were a lot of tensions that were not positives. But just like Jacob and Esau managed to find a way to be together for later Pascha, the same way we are doing it at the moment. We are entering the same path that Yaakov and Esau used to take. And I think this is more than Yaakov and Ishmael. This is something that I understood very quickly from John Paul II, that when I meet the other person, I should not convince the other person to think the way I think. It's the other way around. It's that I can touch God. I can touch this divine spark. And every person has got the divine spark in their soul. So this is the question of how I can touch that person, how I can understand, how I can be in touch with this divine spark. And so when we have such a meeting, it's not about convincing each other. It's more about strengthening my faith, thanks to understanding, meeting another person who is also a believer and has faith. Thank you very much for this opportunity to meet up. Unfortunately, I was not able to join you via Teams, but I would like to wish you all the best. Shalom. And it is also all about the holy city, Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Michael, for this greeting and opening this conference. All the best. And maybe during that day, you will be able to connect up with us, because we are going to be present here until 6 p.m. I will try to do so. Thank you very much. Shalom. So now there is a request. We have Bishop Markowski. Can we tell him to move to the video conference? Dobrze, już powiemy na drugim kanale, ażeby się przełączył na salę główną. Prośba do biskupa Markowskiego, który słucha tutaj na kanale angielskim i teraz się uśmiecha, zdaje się, ażeby się przełączył do sali głównej, ponieważ tutaj jest tylko tłumaczenie i tu nie będzie wizji. Jest drugi link, który został podany. Mam nadzieję, że pani Weronika może podać, bo jako tłumaczka nie za bardzo mogę teraz podać, ale ta główna sala to był główny link, który był podany pod wydarzeniem.
Tak, księże biskupie.
O, proszę, już tu kolega pomoże. Bardzo dziękujemy.
Ja mogę wysłać teraz e-mailem plik Worda, gdzie można kliknąć salę główną, dobrze? Za minutę, jeśli to możliwe.
Ja słyszę pana profesora bardzo dobrze. Bardzo, bardzo dziękujemy. So what is happening with Bishop Markowski? Can we see him already in the main room of the video conference? Tak, już zdaje się ksiądz Sławomir też pomógł i powiedział dokładnie, co trzeba zrobić, Pawłowski, więc myślę, że wszystko się udało. Greetings to our bishop. Podziękowania też dla księdza Pawłowskiego za pomoc.
Excellent. In short, Michael Schudrick had difficulties in entering our main floor, but I'm hoping that you have done so successfully. Please, we ask you to open the conference officially. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to open this conference. At the same time, I'd like to welcome all of the participants of the conference and express my gratefulness to the organizers, which I direct to Professor Sławomir Żurek. This is an achievement. Over the past months, we've been working remotely. This conference came to fruition, or is coming to fruition at this difficult time. Thank you to all of those who contributed to organization of this conference, because it undertakes a very important topic, as observer of social life in various aspects of it, we are suffering a crisis of sorts of dialogue as such, and specifically, being more specific, the culture of dialogue, which means a meeting of two persons that represent different viewpoints, but who at the same time are able to listen to one another and rationally convince one another. This is a conference that not just reminds of the culture of dialogue, and I do experience this and observe this and see the crisis. This interfaith dialogue between Judaism and Christianity is of particular importance because, in spite of the processes we are observing, both the secularization and a sort of a crisis that has touched religious institutions, particularly crisis within the Catholic Church, in spite of all these processes, I'm convinced that Judaism and Christianity are not losing in any way their potency as systems that take up the key questions of human existence, the sense of that existence, and play incredible role of reminding us of human dignity, value of human life, building of community and between human beings, of caring and overstepping barriers and directing a person towards God. So this dialogue, interfaith dialogue, which is the very subject of this conference, is important and current. Thirdly, this conference is taking place in unique days in which we are celebrating 80th anniversary, if we could say, of Warsaw Ghetto gates being closed and borders being closed. So that reminds us of the tragedy of the Jewish people, of the Shoah, and raises the question how that could have happened on Christian lands. And one final matter to focus on is the interreligious dialogue, the very topic, since John 23rd, who established the Secretariat for Dialogue between Judaic and Christian dialogue. Since then, this dialogue has continued. At the time of John Paul II, this changed. This was raised to the level of a council, of papal council, that in spite of this Secretariat for non-Christians, the Catholic and Judaic dialogue continues as part of the Council for Support of Christians. And this conference will help us understand why this is so. Thank you for the honor of opening this conference. I welcome all of you and wish fruitful deliberations to all of you. Thank you, Bishop, and to all those who wish to meet with the Bishop today. You will have the opportunity, particularly in the course of the panel that we've planned for 4:30 today. So also, if Bishop would find time in your calendar to continue and debate with us through the course of the conference, please do so. At this stage, we will hear the inaugural address or lecture of our conference. This will be a lecture provided by Reverend Professor Etienne Emmanuel Vetor, who is the head of the Chamonix community and professor of the Pontifical University Gregoriana or Gregorianum. And it is there that he also directs the Center for Cardinal Béat, which researchers in Judaism and Christian-Jewish dialogue. He is an author of many publications, theological publications. His most recent publication, The Breath of God, on Holy Trinity, has been published in 2019 in Oregon Press. We will now hear Professor Beto's lecture asking why the Christian-Jewish dialogue is the basis or foundation of a Christian church. Oddajemy głos Etienne'owi, profesorowi Etienne'owi Beto. Bardzo dziękuję profesorowi zwracam się do profesora Żurka za po pierwsze zaproszenie mnie na tę konferencję. Dziękuję, bo tematyka jest bogata i widzę po programie, że ona będzie adresowana szeroko. Ja natomiast chcę podnieść temat, który jest szczególnie cenny i ważny dla mego serca, mianowicie w jakim zakresie dialog żydowsko-chrześcijański ważny jako podstawa tożsamości Kościoła, jak to pomaga Kościołowi lepiej zrozumieć się i tą korelację z narodem żydowskim, i tym będę chciał się zająć, wyjaśnić w tych najbliższych minutach. Chcę mianowicie podkreślić, że dialog żydowski jest podstawą tożsamości Kościoła. Kościół może być sobą jedynie, jeśli pozostaje w relacji z Żydami, bo Kościół jako taki, jego tożsamość pochodzi od narodu żydowskiego. A zatem te relacje leżą u podstaw, ponieważ ta relacja między Kościołem a Żydami ma charakter fundamentalny. Kościół nie może być sobą bez narodu żydowskiego. To nic nowego, bo Kościół zawsze twierdził i mówił o przyjęciu objawienia od narodu żydowskiego i Mesjasza, ale jednocześnie często mówił, że zastępuje naród żydowski. To, co nowe w obecnym zrozumieniu Kościoła, to to, że otrzymała dary od Żydów bez zastąpienia. W 1980 biskup Moguncji stwierdził, że nie zostało nigdy to powołanie, przymierze stare nigdy nie zostało odwołane przez Boga i można je znaleźć w wielu innych dokumentach, takich jak katechizm czy encyklika Franciszka, papieża Franciszka. Z 2015 dokument mówi jasno, że Kościół nie zastępuje ludu Bożego Izraela. Jakie to rodzi implikacje dla zrozumienia tego podstawowego, fundacyjnego, bazowego zrozumienia relacji Kościoła? I wyrażę to w 3 punktach. Po pierwsze, naród żydowski pozostaje w unikalnym sensie ludem Bożym, a po drugie Kościół odnajduje fundament w narodzie żydowskim nie jako coś przeszłego, jako otrzymanie spuścizny od tego narodu, ale należy o tym myśleć w kategoriach teraźniejszości, ponieważ lud Boży, Izrael również, od dziś do końca czasu ma rolę do odegrania w zbawieniu. Poza tym wyrażenie lud Boży musi być rozumiana w szerszym sensie niż dotąd to robiliśmy w chrześcijaństwie, ponieważ obejmuje zarówno lud żydowski, nawet jeśli to nie znaczy dzisiaj to samo, również judaizm, a także chrześcijaństwo. Żeby przejść i omówić te punkty, rozpocznę od fundamentu biblijnego i poświęcę nieco czasu, sporo czasu na znaczenie tego. Następnie te trzy argumenty teologiczne szerzej omówię, ale będę musiał również dodać trzecią część i niestety będę musiał jeszcze trzecią rzecz podnieść. Paradoks polega na tym, że będę mówił o wadze tego dialogu chrześcijańsko-żydowskiego, ale wiem, że część tego, co będę mówił, będzie trudna do przyjęcia dla naszych partnerów żydowskich, może być nawet raniąca. Ponieważ w jakimś zakresie będę ukazywał, jak Kościół katolicki przypisuje pewną rolę Żydom w ramach swojej technologii. I niekoniecznie Żydzi muszą być szczęśliwi z tego, że ktoś inny z zewnątrz im przyznaje taką rolę. Będę oczywiście konfrontować z trudnością i nie uda mi się to oczywiście osiągnąć w sposób satysfakcjonujący, ale proszę pamiętać, że w tej chwili przede wszystkim przedstawiam z jednej strony teologię chrześcijańską i przedstawiam, jak ten dialog chrześcijańsko-żydowski zmienia naszą pojęcie samych siebie. To być też niekomfortowe i bolesne dla niektórych Żydów, ale również chrześcijan. I badając ten temat, odkrywam go dla siebie również i będzie to bazą do dyskusji. Po pierwsze, ten wymiar Pisma Świętego, czego uczy Pismo Święte o relacji między Kościołem a Izraelem. Żeby to zrozumieć, możemy skupić się na jednej kwestii, mianowicie Pismo Święte mówi o relacji pomiędzy danym narodem a narodami. A następnie to pomoże nam zrozumieć miejsce Kościoła, czyli jako relację podstawową mamy naród wybrany, a z drugiej strony narody. I będę mówił o czymś, co nie brzmi, nie jest oryginalne. To jest ten tekst Pawłowy z listu do Rzymian z 11 rozdziału, mianowicie mowa o metaforze drzewa oliwnego i będę mówił niektóre rzeczy, które mogą zabrzmieć oryginalnie, ale używam tej metafory, bo jedno najbardziej jak gdyby rozbudowano passus, który omawia tę relację między Żydami a Kościołem i jak gdyby mówi o Żydach, którzy przyjęli Mesjasza i tymi, którzy nie przyjęli go. Będę to uzupełniał odnośnikami z innych elementów zarówno Nowego Testamentu, jak i Tanach. Pamiętamy, że z czego składa się ta oliwka. Jest święty korzeń i naturalne gałęzie, jak mówi Paweł, Żydzi. Niektóre z tych naturalnych gałęzi jest odłamana czy też złamana, a także mamy szczepionki, wszczepione gałązki. Jaki zatem jest ten korzeń, święty korzeń i czym są gałęzie? Większość badaczy uznaje, Kościół uznaje że korzeniem są patriarchowie, a szczególnie Abraham. I mowa jest dalej o potomkach naturalnych i potomkach według obietnicy, czyli z wiary. I na to składa się tak zwana szlachetna oliwka, czyli taka uprawiana, kultywowana przez człowieka. I to, co omawia Paweł, odnosi się do opisów Tanach, które odnoszą się do relacji pomiędzy Bogiem a wybranym ludem. Am Elohim, Am Adonai. To są dwie kluczowe postaci Tanach. Lud, Bóg, który mówi, jest Bogiem Abrahama, Izaaka i Jakuba, i jest Bogiem Izraela. To, co ciekawe, i większość chrześcijan tutaj zareaguje na to, że ten lud określany jest Am, czyli Am, Laos, ale również Eda, czyli społeczność, a w greckim przekłada się to na synagoga albo kahal, czyli zgromadzenie, a po grecku oczywiście to jest przełożone na słowo eklezja. Słyszymy zatem ten podstawowy, pierwotny lud, który jest eklezją, świętym ludem kapłańskim i narodem świętym. Dlaczego Bóg wybrał ten naród? Jest jeszcze trzecia postać. Poza Bogiem i Am są jeszcze Goim, czyli narody. I w każdym przypadku co najmniej 90%, w 90% Am zarezerwowane jest dla Izraela, a narody są określane jako narody. Nie zawsze, ale w większości przytłaczającej przypadków. Czyli mamy to rozróżnienie w historii zbawienia na jeden naród i narody. Dlaczego? Ponieważ Bóg chce błogosławić narody poprzez Abrahama i jego potomków. Czyli narody otrzymają szczególne błogosławieństwo, a lud Izraela jest światłem dla narodów. Izajasz 42:6, 49:6, 63. Widać, że ten lud ma szczególną relację do reszty narodów. To, co jest raczej niejasne, albo pada wiele odpowiedzi na to w Tanach, to jak będą te narody błogosławione, w jaki sposób. I tutaj jest kilka modeli tego. Głównym modelem jest to, że na początku Izajasza odczytujemy, również w Jeremiaszu 16 czy Micheaszu 4 rozdziale, mianowicie widzimy tam Syjon, Izrael, do którego przyjdą wszystkie narody, by przyjąć naukę od Syjonu, ale to nie jedyny model, jest jeszcze kilka innych, między innymi głębsza integracja narodów w ludzie Bożym albo z ludem Bożym. Kiedy mówię o większym zakresie integracji, mam na myśli uczestnictwo. Prorocy nawet mówią w niektórych miejscach, że narody będą również ludem Bożym. Zachariasz 2, werset 15 mówi: będą moim ludem. Izajasz mówi coś szokującego, mianowicie mówi, że nawet Egipt i Asyria będą nazwane moim ludem. Izajasz 19:25. I będą nawet kapłanami, którzy zostaną wybrani pośród narodów. Lewitami i kapłanami. To jest Izajasz 66:21. Będą kapłanami i lewitami. A zatem ten obraz drzewa oliwnego polega na tym, że narody będą wszczepione i to jest to tak spełniane są proroctwa, że narody otrzymują coś od ludu Bożego. Lud Boży jest oddzielony, ale nie po to, żeby pozostawać w oddzieleniu, ale aby nauczać narody i również przyjąć i ten współudział narodów. Co się zatem mesjańskich, mesjanistycznych, w erze mesjańskiej, idąc za tą metaforą Pawła, mianowicie naturalne gałęzie, które są odłamane albo niezmienione, według proroctw stanowią lud wraz z narodami w czasach mesjańskich. Nalegam na to, że pozostają te pierwotne gałęzie niedotknięte, niezłamane. Mianowicie w tekście jest mowa o tym, że tylko niektóre gałęzie są złamane albo odłamane. Większość tłumaczeń błędnie mówi, że wszczepione gałązki będą w miejsce naturalnych gałęzi, ale tak naprawdę chodzi o wszczepienie pośród gałęzi. To wszczepienie nie jest w miejscu zastępującym naturalne gałęzie, ale pośród tych naturalnych gałęzi. Kim zatem są te naturalne gałązki, które pozostają niezmienione? To jest moja naturalnie interpretacja, ale opiera się on spójnie. Mianowicie tutaj jest mowa, odnosi się to do pierwotnego kościoła judeo-chrześcijańskiego, takich jak Mesjasz, Paweł, apostołowie, Matka Jezusa, apostołowie, pierwsza społeczność wierzących w Jezusa. I większość z nich, pierwszego pokolenia wierzących w Jezusa, to Żydzi. I tutaj podkreślę, proroctwa Nowego Przymierza nie mówią o nowym narodzie, nowym ludzie. I czytam Jeremiasza 31, jeden z fundamentalnych tekstów. Dni na pewno przyjdą, mówi Pan, kiedy zawrę nowe przymierze z domem Izraela i z domem Judy. Jest nowe przymierze, ale z kim? Z tymi samymi, z tym samym narodem, Izraelem i Judą. List do Hebrajczyków cytuje ten urywek w Hebrajczyków 8 rozdziale i nie mówi wtedy o nowym przymierzu, partnerze przymierza, czy stronie przymierza, ale o nowym przymierzu. I innymi słowy, to samo nauczanie mamy w Hebrajczyków. Nie mamy innego narodu, ale naród odnowiony, lud odnowiony. Z jednej strony mamy tych, którzy są odjęci i znowu nalegam, te gałązki to część ludu Bożego, nie ze względu na Mesjasza, oni pozostają narodem, ludem Bożym od patriarchów i pozostają święci. Paweł to mówi bardzo jasno w wersecie 16. Są święci ze względu na ich relacje z patriarchami. A zatem co jest tutaj nowego? Myślę, że ich świadomość Mesjasza, Jezusa, jego pasji i zmartwychwstania, męki i zmartwychwstania, dlatego również, że ze względu przyjęcia, to, że Żydzi ci przyjęli narody, co to znaczy? W jakimś sensie Paweł wybiera pomiędzy różnymi modelami w Tanachu. Paweł wybiera i mówi o wszczepieniu. To kolejna metafora przecież. Interpretuję ją tutaj, ale wszczepienie wszczep tworzy silną więź. Paweł jak gdyby wybiera ten model uczestnictwa, a nie tylko przyjęcia nauki, nauczanie narodów. czyli mówi o głębokiej integracji. Jest jeszcze wiele tekstów innych, które to potwierdza. Cała mowa o tym, Pawła, o tym, kto jest dzieckiem Abrahama, mianowicie mówi o tym, że poganie, twierdząc, że poganie wszczepieni stają się prawdziwymi dziećmi bożymi. I w tym sensie może Efezjan 3 rozdziale mowa o tajemnicy, że są spadkobiercami razem z Izraelem, członkami jednego ciała i uczestnikami. To był Efezjan 3:6, a nieco wcześniej, 2:19, autor listu mówi, że poganie stają się współobywatelami świętych i członkami domu Bożego. I to jest ta głębsza wersja integracji, nie zastąpienie, ale głęboka integracja. I tu warto to podkreślić, że nie ma tutaj, można powiedzieć, scalenia jako takiego. I to znowu moja interpretacja tekstu. Rozpocznę od metafory, a następnie potwierdzę to, cytując inne teksty Pawłowe, mianowicie pełna integracja, ale bez scalenia jako takiego. Mianowicie trzeba pamiętać, że gałązki wszczepione wydają inne owoce. Widziałem takie drzewko jabłoń, która rodziła naturalnie czerwone jabłka i ktoś wszczepił gałązkę. I po 25 lat po wszczepie widziałem na tym drzewku mnóstwo czerwonych jabłek, ale była taka wszczepiona część, która rodziła żółte jabłka. I w Rzymian 11 tutaj czyni różnicę między gałązkami według natury, katafizin, i gałęziami wszczepionymi. Można powiedzieć w sposób inny niż natura, albo inaczej niż naturalnie. Tekst z Efezjan, który cytowałem, jest dla mnie ważny, ponieważ podkreśla tę głęboką integrację, ale i rozróżnienie. Dlaczego o tym mówię? To odrębność, ponieważ stają się oni spadkobiercami, członkami tego samego ciała i współuczestnikami obietnicy. Sine to jest relacja, ale utrzymuje się to rozróżnienie. Oni współpracują, są wprowadzeni, kimś wprowadzonym, co oznacza to, że mamy do czynienia z pełną równością i Paweł nalega na tę równość pogan i Żydów w odniesieniu do zbawienia, ale pozostaje rozróżnienie. I w eskatonie, końcu czasów, odnajdujemy to również. Jeśli popatrzymy na Księgę Objawienia, to a propos w katolickiej liturgii czytamy głównie koniec tego tekstu, gdzie mówimy o wszystkie narody zgromadzone, wiele narodów i języków przed tronem baranka. Ale przeskakujemy 3 czy 4 ważne wiersze przed tym, które mówią o tym, że przed tronem stoi 144 000 plemion Izraela. Są razem z narodami, ale jak gdyby stoją w pierwszym rzędzie, czyli odróżnieni wyraźnie. A zatem w tym odnowionym drzewie oliwnym mamy 2 rodzaje gałązek. Te wszczepione gałązki pogan i naturalne gałązki, czyli Izrael. I co dzieje się z tymi gałązkami, które nie przyjęły Mesjasza, albo jak Paweł mówi, i mówi to precyzyjnie, tych, którzy pozostają w apistia, albo w stanie niewiary, albo niewierności. Co się dzieje z tymi gałązkami zatem? I tutaj bardzo podejdźmy do tego tekstu precyzyjnie. I Nanos podkreśla, mianowicie kiedy mówi tak, że słowo, które oddaje ekeo, często jest eklao, tłumaczone jako odcięte albo odrywane. W Septuagincie, czyli tym tekście, z którego korzysta Paweł w większości, wiem, że Paweł sięga do Septuaginty. W Septuagincie oznacza ono złamanie, ale bez oderwania. W Lewitikus na przykład 1:17 kapłan ma złożyć ptaka, lewita składa taką ofiarę, ma rozerwać ptaka bez rozcinania go i używa właśnie wtedy słowo eklao. I tutaj w tych gałązkach mamy gałązkę, która jest zgięta albo lekko nadłamana, ale nie odcięta i w tym stanie jest w stanie czerpać jeszcze życiodajnych soków. I kiedy Paweł mówi tym dzikim gałązkom, że jeśli one będą niewierne, to będą odcięte i wtedy używa słowo inne. Mówi eklazę, które jest mocniejsze i to jest słowo na odcięcie, czyli naturalne gałązki nie mogą być odcięte. Trudniej jest je oderwać. Paweł jednocześnie mówi, że trzeba je wszczepić ponownie, także coś z nimi jest nie tak, są zranione, ale jednocześnie Paweł mówi, że będzie dużo łatwiej wszczepić łatwiej niż wszczepienie tych dzikich gałązek. Łatwiej wszczepić naturalne gałęzie, które są jedynie nadłamane albo zgięte, niż narody wszczepić, czyli te dzikie gałązki. Rzymian 11:24. I to jest spójne z resztą studiowanego urywka Rzymian. Na początku tej części, rozpoczynającej się od rozdziału 5, Paweł w czasie teraźniejszym wymienia wszystkie dary, które przyjął Izrael. I w czasie teraźniejszym oni są Izraelitami i do nich należą przyjęcie, chwała i przymierze. Grecki mówi, do nich należy przywiązanie, albo w ramach którego są synami i córkami. Nie muszą czekać na Mesjasza, by stać się synami i córkami. Nie będę czytał reszty tekstu, bo znacie te teksty Państwo, ale ci potknęli się, nie upadli, 10:32 i 11:11, że to jest ten Izrael, który zostanie zbawiony i w 11 mówi, że dary i powołania Boże są nieodwołalne. Innymi słowy, fundamentem tego było stwierdzenie Jana Pawła II, który mówi, że Izrael nie został odrzucony, mianowicie, że Stare Przymierze nie zostało odwołane. I tutaj możemy empiryczne dowody na to znaleźć. Jednym z nich jest to, co stało się z narodem żydowskim w ostatnich ciągu 2000 lat. Czy oni wyglądają jak zeschnięta gałąź? Nie, zaoferowali nam skarby bogactwa kulturowego, naukowego i tak dalej. Tacy autorzy niedawni jak Heschel czy Buber, wiemy, że to nie jest gałąź oliwna, która jest odłamana czy zeschnięta, zwiędła. Dla niektórych, i tutaj kończę mój wykład biblijny i streszę za chwilę, mianowicie sytuacja empiryczna, która rozwinęła się na przestrzeni 2000 lat, nie koresponduje albo nie pokrywa się z rozróżnieniami, które prezentuje Paweł teologicznie. Dla niego rozróżnienie podstawowe to lud Boży, czyli ta szlachetna oliwka i wszczep. I są na niej nietknięte i są też nadłamane gałązki. Dla nas głównym rozróżnieniem jest chrześcijaństwo i judaizm. Judaizm odnosi się do tych nadłamanych gałęzi naturalnych, a chrześcijaństwo w bardzo niewyraźny sposób obejmuje zarówno te nietknięte, jak i te wszczepione gałęzi. I dokładnie o czym mówi Paweł, że nie ma tutaj, jakie są konsekwencje tego teologiczne. I tutaj zwięźle będę starał się to przedstawić, tak ażeby profesor nie będzie musiał mi przerywać, mówiąc zatrzymajmy się. 3 uwagi. Pierwsza, że lud Izraela pozostaje w szczególny sposób ludem Bożym. Są naturalnym drzewem. Są w naturalny sposób zakorzenieni i święci. Trudno brzmieć, dziwnie to brzmi, naturalnie święci, ponieważ dla nas chrześcijan to pochodzi z łaski, ale początek jest taki, mamy do czynienia z ludem, który został zebrany przez Boga, wyjątkowy, kahal, czyli lud Izraela, lud żydowski, obejmuje większość, która nie postrzega Jezusa jako Mesjasza. I ci pozostają ludem Izraela. I ludem Bożym w szczególny sposób. Kościół jest również ludem Bożym, to jest częścią wiary katolickiej podczas drugiego Soboru Watykańskiego. Wyrażone to zostało, ale nowy nie znaczy nowy, tylko odnowiony. I nowe serce nie znaczy transplantacja serca, ale to samo serce odrodzone, odnowione. Czyli odrodzony lud i Kościół może być ludem Bożym ze względu na to, że pozostaje zakotwiczony w pierwotnym ludzie Izraelu i to jest najtrudniejsze do wyjaśnienia, nie dlatego, że to nie znalazłem jeszcze odpowiedniego wyrazu na to, idealnego. Kościół jest samym sobą tylko dzięki żywej relacji z ludem Bożym, nie tylko ze względu na przeszłość, nie ze względu tylko na to, że Kościół przyjął dziedzictwo od Izraela, ale czerpie ten szczepka czerpie z korzenia. Co to oznacza teologicznie? Oznacza to mianowicie, że Kościół jest szczepką narodów do konkretnego ludu. W bardzo pełny sposób. Tak jak dziecko adoptowane wprowadzane jest do swojej rodziny, nowej rodziny. Mamy zatem rzeczywistość, która tworzy pewną jedność numeryczną. Ta odnowiona część tego ludu, Kościół, różni się od tej części tego ludu Bożego, która jest przymierzem mojżeszowym, które żyje i działa w ramach swojej struktury. Ale ontologicznie i teologicznie jest to ta sama rzeczywistość. Kiedy mowa podczas Soboru Watykańskiego o powstaniu Kościoła, jest tam jasno powiedziane, że Kościół że początki jego wiary i wyboru znajdują się wśród patriarchów Mojżesza i proroków. Kościół nie jest tylko przygotowywany albo zapowiadany, ale Kościół rozpoczyna się w Kahal Elohim, czyli w ludzie Bożym, Izraelu. Kiedy zatem dyskutujemy, czy Kościół, my w liturgii mówimy, czy Kościół rozpoczął się od przyjścia Zbawiciela, czy zesłania Ducha Świętego, rozpoczyna się od powołania patriarchów. I oczywiście to rzutuje na nasze koncepcje zbawienia. Eklezjologia tutaj odnosi się do tego. To nie tylko mamy zbawienie i nowonarodzenie. Mówię do chrześcijan. Jezus nas zbawia, wybawiając nas od naszych grzechów, ale również poprzez wszczepienie nas w lud Izraela. Narody stają się dziećmi Izraela. Dlatego Paweł i Jan mówią, kto jest dzieckiem Bożym, ponieważ to jest elementem zbawienia, czyli bycie częścią tego ludu. Mamy tutaj jeszcze aspekt sakramentalny, ale potrzebowałbym innym aspektem, innej wykładu. Jeśli chrzest czyni nas częścią ludu Bożego i o tym nie mówimy raczej ani na teologii, ani chrzest powoduje, że poganin staje się częścią pierwotnego, oryginalnego narodu Bożego. Nie tylko narodu Chrystusowego, ale Izraela. Nie dokładnie tak samo jak te naturalne gałązki, ale tak samo silnie jak te prawdziwe gałązki, te oryginalne, naturalne gałązki. Oczywiście, może bardziej jeszcze konkretnie to powiem. To mogłoby zmienić, ta świadomość może zmienić realia Kościoła. Dlaczego nie wspominamy o pramatkach, o patriarchach, kiedy mówimy o świętych, w litanii świętych? Większość litanii rozpoczyna się od Jana Chrzciciela i parę jeszcze wymienionych tylko imion z Starego Testamentu. Już kończę, wyczerpałem swój czas, ale oznacza to, że kiedy mówimy Izrael w naszych czytaniach podczas mszy, kiedy mówimy Izrael, to o kim mówimy? Większość chrześcijan myśli ja i Kościół, ale nie. Intencją piszącego i Ducha Świętego, który inspirował, tu chodzi o pierwotny lud Boży. Z powodu wszczepienia chrześcijanie również mogą powiedzieć, również nas, ale przez adopcję, poprzez wszczepienie. trzecia uwaga teologiczna, i tutaj już bardzo ściśle profesor mnie kontroluje, także muszę to streścić, a nie mogę wejść w ekspozycję. Trzecia uwaga, naród izraelski pozostaje ludem Bożym w szczególny sposób. Kościół jest Kościołem, ponieważ w żywy sposób został wszczepiony do tego ludu. Dziś, nie tylko w przeszłości, a po trzecie oznacza to, że cały lud Boży, czyli cała rzeczywistość, która jest bardziej złożona niż zwykle myślimy, mianowicie rzeczywistość, która zawiera zarówno Izrael, jak i Kościół. I te koncepcje nie są idealnie pokrywające się, ale judaizm i chrześcijaństwo, ponieważ to stanowi całość drzewa. I proponuję, że w ramach tego drzewa powinniśmy rozróżnić pewne rozróżnienie językowe. Lud Boży to cały naród, ale lud Izraela to naród żydowski wyłącznie, tak żeby utrzymać to rozróżnienie. Mianowicie narody stają się częścią rodziny Abrahama, ale nie stają się Żydami jako takimi. Jeśli to prawda, to cała ta rzeczywistość jest rzeczywistością zranioną. Kościół jest zraniony i to jest pojęcie, które używamy w ekumenicznej teologii i to potwierdzamy w Dominus Jezus. I Kościół jest zraniony, kiedy rani naród Izraela, nie rozpoznaje Izraela, kiedy odcina się od Izraela. Czegoś brakuje. I to jest coś bardzo konkretnego. Judaizm i chrześcijaństwo powstawały w opozycji i oba przez to utraciły pewne elementy, które były obecne w tym świętym korzeniu. Przykładowo, jeden wymiar, który jest niecentralny w nauczaniu Kościoła, to wymiar eschatologiczny. Proroctwa Starego Testamentu nie zostały jeszcze w pełni zrealizowane, w pełni spełnione w Jezusie, ale mam nadzieję, że po polsku to też można rozróżnić. Realizacja w historii jeszcze nie nastąpiła. Mowa jest, nie będzie śmierci, płaczu, pełna sprawiedliwość i pokój dla wszystkich. W chrześcijaństwie w pewnym sensie zapomnieliśmy o wadze tego. A naród żydowski, i jeśli mi wolno powiedzieć, jest również zraniony w swoim powołaniu do nauczania narodów, to niełatwe oczywiście, i utracił pewne wymiary, które są fundamentalnie żydowskie. Na przykład, na ile centralne jest oczekiwanie dla judaizmu, albo nadzieja zmartwychwstania. W modlitwach to oczywiście ile jest to centralne w życiu codziennym Żyda. I zasygnalizowałem tę trzecią część i wiem, że to, co mówię, jest trudne do przełknięcia, można powiedzieć, dla wielu Żydów. Może być nawet raniące. Dlaczego? Ponieważ Żydzi nie życzą sobie takiego wszczepionych narodów. Dlaczego by mieli chcieć? Ale dlatego również, że przypisuję im pewne miejsce w historii zbawienia. I dlaczego ksiądz katolicki miałby im przypisywać miejsce w zbawieniu? I również ze względu na tę koncepcję jednego ludu Bożego, bo on może być znowu postrzegany jako jako próbę Kościoła wchłonięcia Izraela. Mam nadzieję, że to nie jest zniechęcające, co mówię, ale podkreślę jeszcze tylko to. Konsekwencją tego, co mówię, nie jest to, że Żydzi mają przyłączyć się do Kościoła, ale raczej chodzi o to, żeby Kościół uznał, że potrzebny mu jest naród żydowski, by zrealizować przymierze. Myślę, że to rozejście się między tymi dwoma religiami nie było zamiarem Bożym. Może w jakimś sensie jednakże było, ponieważ z jednej strony to ochroniło Żydów przed wchłonięciem przez Kościół. Także tak, to nie jest wystarczające wyjaśnienie, ale konsekwencją pozostającą do dziś jest to, że Żydzi pozostawiają Kościołowi możliwość bycia sobą i to jest przedmiotem naszej dyskusji. Chrześcijanie mogą być lepszymi chrześcijanami, a Żydzi mogą być lepszymi Żydami. Dziękuję bardzo.
Bardzo dziękujemy, Etienne, za ten bardzo ciekawy i niesamowity wykład. Bardzo mi przykro, niestety nie mamy czasu na pytania, ponieważ mamy teraz od razu drugą sesję, która będzie moderowana przez księdza doktora Tomasza Adamczyka. Going to the second part of the conference, I would like to welcome everyone, but especially our speakers, Rabbi Professor Walter Homolka and Professor Jan Grossfeld. In just a moment, one of them will tell us who are Christians for Jews, and the second speaker will tell us who are Jews for Christians. And before I introduce our speakers, I would like to add that our conference entitled Christian-Jewish Dialogue, Interreligious or Ecumenical Dialogue. It is not just a discussion about dialogue, but at the same time, it is also a praxis. And I am really happy that this is the continuation, because I had the chance to meet Walter Homolka during our visit in Berlin. And we went there with a visit with the seminaries from Lublin, for those who are getting ready to become priests from the Lublin Seminary. And Rabbi Walter Homolka is director of Abraham Geiger College and also director of School of Jewish Theology at the Potsdam University. He is the president of Leo Baeck Foundation, a member of the supervisory board of the Giza Foundation, Jews and Christians Circle at the Central German, and also for an important institution in London, as well as a Polish-German association. He has published many important papers and books on Jewish-Christian relations. He has been connected with Poland for many years. In 2008, by the Polish Council of Christian and Jews with the title of the Person of Reconciliation. The second speaker, Professor Jan Grossfeld, Professor Emeritus of the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. For many years, he chaired the chair at the politology department of the university. Before that, he was responsible for the Church of the Civilization of Europe, and also for other churches. For many years, he has been a member for the Polish Bishops' Conference, also a body for the dialogue. He has also published many translations regarding religion, politics from French and English. He has published such publications as Why Do Christians Need Jews?, Christians, Jews, the World, and many others. In 2019, Professor Jan Grossfeld received the award, Stanisław Musiał Award. And now I would like Professor Walter Hamolka, our rabbi, to take the floor and give us his lecture. Bardzo dziękuję za tak miłe powitanie. Postaram się nawiązywać do jakże ciekawych uwag profesora Etienne Vieto i mam nadzieję, że nie będę tutaj niczego zabierał. Jeśli rozpocznę od krótkiej historii dotyczącej żydowskiego postrzegania chrześcijan przez wieki. Chociaż żydowskie postrzeganie chrześcijan i chrześcijańskie postrzeganie Żydów znacznie się poprawiło w ostatnich dziesięcioleciach, Żydzi i chrześcijanie wciąż źle pojmują wiele tekstów i tradycji tej drugiej kultury. Tak oceniają sytuację Amy Jill Levine i Mark Zvi Bretle w przedmowie do ich przełomowego dzieła The Jewish Annotated New Testament. Obecnie judaizm reformowany, jak również zdecydowana większość ruchu konserwatywnego uznają wspólne chrześcijańskie przekonania o boskim stworzeniu i nieśmiertelności duszy, a także o przestrzeganiu zasad moralnych. Ciekawe jest to, że ortodoksyjni Żydzi również stopniowo otwierają się na dialog międzywyznaniowy. To daje powód do nadziei. Z drugiej strony, taka otwartość umysłu nie zawsze miała miejsce. Aż do XX wieku, nie tylko początku XX wieku, Żydzi i chrześcijanie mieli niewiele wspólnych podstaw do dyskursu. Intencją mojego mającego się wkrótce pojawić w formie drukowanej eseju jest przyjrzenie się bliżej rozwojowi żydowskich poglądów na chrześcijaństwo. W tym miejscu dzisiaj mogę tylko zaoferować krótkie podsumowanie, streszczenie. Rabin Louis Jacobs, jeden z najwybitniejszych rabinicznych uczonych czasów, przyglądał się rozwojowi chrześcijaństwa od żydowskiej sekty do rywalizującej z nią religii nie-Żydów, gajów. W swoim najwcześniejszym okresie chrześcijaństwo było postrzegane przez żydowskich nauczycieli jako herezja żydowska. Jej wyznawcami byli Żydzi, którzy wierzyli w boskość Chrystusa. Ale kiedy chrześcijaństwo rozprzestrzeniło się i stało się religią światową, z licznymi nawróconymi ze świata pogan, stało się religią rywalizującą z judaizmem. Chrześcijanie byli wtedy postrzegani jako poganie nie dlatego, że byli chrześcijanami, ale dlatego, że w większości byli rzeczywiście Gentiles, nie byli Żydami. Koniec cytatu. Żydzi przez wiele wieków postrzegali chrześcijaństwo przede wszystkim w kontekście bałwochwalstwa, czyli po hebrajsku awodach zarach. Talmud poświęca cały traktat prawom interakcji pomiędzy Żydami a nie-Żydami i lub bałwochwalcami. Został on spisany w Babilonie około 550 roku naszej ery. Judaizm zabrania w nim bałwochwalstwa we wszystkich jego formach. Jest to główna podstawa, dla której wielu średniowiecznych i późniejszych halachistów, czyli ekspertów w zakresie prawa żydowskiego, klasyfikowało chrześcijaństwo jako bałwochwalstwo ze względu na jego doktryny o Trójcy, wcielenie, twierdzenie że Jezus miał boską naturę oraz kult obrazów. Po raz kolejny przytaczam słowa Jakobsa. Podstawowym problemem w średniowieczu było to, że talmudyczne reguły dotyczące awodach zarach miały zastosowanie do nowych religii. Dla Żyda oddawanie czci bożkom przez nie-Żyda oznaczało obrazę jednego z 7 praw Noego. Louis Jacobs wyjaśnia. Dopiero w XIII wieku rabin Menachem Meiri z Perpignan argumentował i był pierwszym odnotowanym halachistą, który to zrobił, że chrześcijan nie należy traktować jako bałwochwalców, że wielu reguł talmudycznych nie można sprawiedliwie odnieść do tych, których Meiri nazywa narodami rządzonymi przez religię. Wielu uczonych skupia się na polemicznym postrzeganiu chrześcijan przez Żydów w okresie średniowiecza. Inaczej jednak Jakob Katz w swoim już klasycznym dziele Exclusiveness and Tolerance, Jewish-Gentile Relations in Medieval and Modern Times z roku 1961. Tutaj opisuje on postawę i zachowanie aszkenazyjskich rabinów wobec chrześcijan od czasów rabina Gershona ben Jehudach aż do czasów Mojżesza Mendelssohna. Katz pokazuje, że wrogość rabinów wobec chrześcijaństwa w Aszkenaz, czyli w Europie Środkowej, od średniowiecza aż do oświecenia osłabła do tego stopnia, że wzrosła tolerancja wobec Żydów w społeczeństwie chrześcijańskim. Także idee tolerancji Mojżesza Mendelssohna nie reprezentowały, jak się często zakłada, rewolucji kulturalnej, ale kontynuację rozwoju normatywnego. Ten złagodzony stosunek do chrześcijaństwa wyblakł podczas formowania się ortodoksji jako ruchu wyznaniowego w pierwszym 30-leciu XIX wieku. Dobrym tego przykładem są nauki rabina Mosesa Schreibera, znanego jako Hatam Sofer, który żył w latach 1762-1839, jednego z najwyższych autorytetów swoich czasów, uważanego za ojca żydowskiej ortodoksji. Jego motto Hadash Asur min HaTorah, Tora zakazuje wszelkich innowacji, stało się naczelną zasadą ortodoksji. Nic więc dziwnego, że Hatam Sofer ponownie umieścił chrześcijan w kategorii bałwochwalców, podobnie jak jego uczeń, rabin Moshe Szyk, jeden z najbardziej wpływowych węgierskich mędrców swojego pokolenia. Pierwsze prawdziwe zbliżenie między Żydami i chrześcijanami nastąpiło we wczesnym okresie nowożytnym. Początek oświecenia był początkiem nowych metodologii i kwestionowania podziałów religijnych i etnicznych. Badania rabina Jakoba Emdena były wczesnym żydowskim zwiastunem zmieniających się czasów. Pisał o tym, a więc już w XVIII wieku, że przesłanie Jezusa w rzeczywistości nie było skierowane do narodu żydowskiego, ale wyłącznie do okolicznych ludów, aby zainspirować ich do przestrzegania praw Noego. W 1773 roku Moses Mendelssohn korespondował z rabinem Jakobem Emdenem w sprawie pytania, czy nie Żydzi mogą osiągnąć wieczną błogość. 4 lata wcześniej napisał list otwarty do szwajcarskiego teologa reformowanego Johanna Kaspara Lavater'a, który wezwał go do przejścia na chrześcijaństwo. W swoim liście Moses Mendelssohn napisał, cytuję: wszyscy nasi rabini jednogłośnie nauczają, że pisane i ustne prawa, na których opiera się nasza religia objawiona, obowiązują tylko nasz naród. Mojżesz nakazał nam prawa i jest to dziedzictwo wspólnoty Jakuba. Wierzymy, że wszystkie inne ludy zostały poinstruowane przez Boga, aby przestrzegały prawa natury i religii patriarchów. Mendelssohn zauważa 7 głównych przykazań Noego, które są luźno powiązane i odpowiadają 10 przykazaniom. Ci, którzy kierują się swoim stylem życia zgodnie z tą religią natury i rozumu, inne narody nazywają mężami cnotliwymi, a oni są dziećmi wiecznego błogosławieństwa. Koniec cytatu. Podsumowując, możemy powiedzieć, że na początku XIX wieku obserwowano silne obawy przed chrześcijaństwem z ortodoksyjnego punktu widzenia, podczas gdy większość Żydów z zadowoleniem przyjęła integrację ze społeczeństwem chrześcijańskim i rozmowy z chrześcijańskimi teologami o otwartych umysłach. Poszukiwanie akceptacji judaizmu jako współczesnego wyrazu wiary zaowocowało również głęboką krytyką doktryny chrześcijańskiej ze strony kluczowych postaci żydowskich, takich jak Abraham Geiger i Leo Beck. W mojej książce Jesus Reclaimed Jewish Perspective on the Nazarene, które ma też wydanie polskie zatytułowane Upominanie się o Jezusa Nazarejczyk z perspektywy żydowskiej, przedstawiam przegląd i analizę różnych poglądów Żydów na Nazarejczyka na przestrzeni wieków. W tym miejscu skupiam się na codziennym postrzeganiu chrześcijan i chrześcijańskich koncepcjach teologicznych przez Żydów w czasach nowożytnych, a mianowicie w XX wieku i obecnie. Rabin Leo Beck i kluczowi przedstawiciele niemieckiego żydostwa byli sercem projektu, który miał na celu przedstawienie zwięzłego przeglądu nauk judaizmu i postrzegania innych religii przez judaizm. W efekcie powstały 3 tomy zatytułowane The Teachings of Judaism from its Sources, die Lehren des Judentums nach den Quellen, Nauki judaizmu ze źródeł, wydane przez Verband der Deutschen Juden, Stowarzyszenie Żydów Niemieckie w 1930 roku, z zamiarem dostarczenia intelektualnego profilu judaizmu. W 5. i ostatniej części dzieła wybitni przedstawiciele myśli niemiecko-żydowskiej odnoszą się do judaizmu w relacji do jego otoczenia. Ponad 300 stron poświęcono badaniu różnic między judaizmem a religiami chrześcijańskimi w odniesieniu do ich podstawowych idei i przejawów. Napisany na krótko przed cezurą w czasach zagłady Die Lehren des Judentums nach den Quellen daje nam wszechstronne zrozumienie stosunku Żydów do chrześcijaństwa i precyzyjnie opisuje linie rozgraniczające je. W moim eseju szczegółowo cytuję badanie takich zagadnień jak antropologia, Trójca Święta, judaizm i jego odrzucanie dogmatu, czczenie Maryi i świętych, posługiwanie się obrazami religijnymi oraz zarządzanie Kościołem. To Leo Beck uznał teologię i misję Pawłową za decydujący punkt zwrotny w historii chrześcijaństwa w odniesieniu do jego stosunku do judaizmu i wczesnej wspólnoty chrześcijańskiej przed Pawłem. Gdy rozwijający się Kościół odwrócić się od swoich przedpaulińskich i żydowskich korzeni judaizm musiał zwrócić się przeciwko Kościołowi. Wbrew twierdzeniom Chrystusa, judaizm został zmuszony do podkreślenia swojego nacisku na ścisły monoteizm i odrzucenia jakiegokolwiek pośrednika między Bogiem a ludźmi. Leo Beck pisze, cytuję, że poprzez swoje zmagania z Kościołem żydowska religia tamtych czasów stawała się coraz bardziej świadoma własnej jaźni. Koniec cytatu. W 1964 roku rabin Józef Dov Soloveitchik, niekwestionowany przywódca powojennej amerykańskiej nowoczesnej ortodoksji, napisał, że stosunki międzywyznaniowe żydowsko-chrześcijańskie, tu cytuję, muszą być skierowane na zewnątrz i związane ze świeckimi porządkami, z którymi ludzie wiary stają twarzą w twarz. W sferze świeckiej możemy dyskutować o stanowiskach, jakie należy zająć, ideach do rozwinięcia i planach do sformułowania. W tych sprawach wspólnoty religijne mogą wspólnie zalecać podejście działań i mogą przejąć inicjatywę, która zostanie później wdrożona przez społeczeństwa. Koniec cytatu. Jego postawa odrzucająca jakikolwiek udział w dyskusjach międzywyznaniowych na poziomie dialogu doktrynalnego została natychmiast zaakceptowana zarówno jako de jure, jak i de facto polityka współczesnej wspólnoty ortodoksyjnej i nadal wywiera taki wpływ. Sobór Watykański II i pontyfikat Jana Pawła II przyniosły znaczące przełomy. Ogłoszona 28 października 1965 roku Nostra Aetate, soborowa deklaracja dotycząca stosunku Kościoła rzymskokatolickiego do religii niechrześcijańskich odrzuciła praktykę przypisywania narodowi żydowskiemu całkowitej odpowiedzialności za śmierć Jezusa. Jednak teologiczne zmiany, jakie nastąpiły po Soborze Watykańskim II, nie zmieniły poglądu niektórych władz żydowskich. W marcu 1967 roku rabin Moshe Feinstein orzekł, że udział w dialogu międzywyznaniowym byłby poważnym naruszeniem zakazu przynależności do bałwochwalstwa. Ogólnie można powiedzieć, że większość Żydów po II wojnie światowej z zadowoleniem przyjęła dialog. Po kilku latach spotkań 4 międzywyznaniowych żydowskich uczonych opublikowało Dabru Emet, Mów Prawdę, jako całostronicowe oświadczenie w New York Times i innych wiodących gazetach 10 września 2000 roku. Podpisane przed ponad 170 rabinów i żydowskich intelektualistów, których liczba sygnatariuszy przekroczyła 220 w kolejnych miesiącach. Dabru Emet został pomyślany jako żydowska odpowiedź na nowe podejście chrześcijan do judaizmu i zawierał następujące punkty. Żydzi i chrześcijanie czczą tego samego Boga. Żydzi i chrześcijanie szukają tego samego autorytetu w tej samej księdze, Biblii, którą Żydzi nazywają Tanachem, a chrześcijanie Starym Testamentem. Chrześcijanie mogą szanować roszczenia narodu żydowskiego do ziemi Izraela. Żydzi i chrześcijanie akceptują moralne zasady Tory. Nazizm nie był zjawiskiem chrześcijańskim. Różnica między Żydami a chrześcijanami, której nie da się pogodzić po ludzku, nie zostanie rozstrzygnięta, dopóki Bóg nie odkupi całego świata, jak obiecuje to Pismo. Nowa relacja między Żydami a chrześcijanami nie osłabi żydowskiej praktyki religijnej. Żydzi i chrześcijanie muszą współpracować na rzecz sprawiedliwości i pokoju. ze strony społeczności żydowskiej i wewnątrz społeczności żydowskiej pojawiły się różne zastrzeżenia do Dabru Emet. Niektórzy uważali, że zaniżał on istotnie różnice teologiczne między dwiema religiami, a podpisało go tylko niewielu ortodoksyjnych rabinów. W ostatnich latach ukazały się dwie kolejne deklaracje ortodoksyjnych Żydów: czynić wolę naszego Ojca w niebie w 2015 roku oraz między Jerozolimą a Rzymem w 2017 roku. W moim eseju przedstawiam te oświadczenia i ich protagonistów. W moim eseju teraz mogę tylko podsumować, że nie wykraczają one poza dążenie do dobrych relacji, żyjąc obok siebie. Nie zamierzają prowadzić merytorycznego dialogu na temat różnic dogmatycznych. I mam nadzieję, że też wykazałem to, jeśli chodzi o ortodoksję od początku XIX wieku. Widzieliśmy, że głosy żydowskie czasami się uzupełniają, a czasami są ze sobą sprzeczne. Może to być mylące dla obserwatorów chrześcijańskich szukających autorytatywnego żydowskiego poglądu na chrześcijaństwo. Jak wspomniano wcześniej, judaizm nie ma władzy centralnej porównywalnej z Kościołem rzymskokatolickim. Nie ma hierarchii ani jedności religijnej. W judaizmie ortodoksyjnym istnieje szereg społeczności i praktyk, w tym współczesny judaizm ortodoksyjny, judaizm haredi i różnorodne ruchy wywodzące się z judaizmu hasyckiego. Ci pozostają w dużej mierze nieaktywni, jeśli chodzi o teologiczne kwestie związane z chrześcijaństwem. Poszukując nieortodoksyjnego stanowiska, które mogłoby wypełnić ten środek pośród bardziej otwartej większości Żydów, pozwolę sobie przejść do tomu The Observant Life, The Wisdom of Conservative Judaism for Contemporary Jews, opublikowane zupełnie niedawno, bo w 2012 roku. W tym dziele rabin Jeremy Kalmanowski omawia stosunki międzywyznaniowe. Wyjaśnia, cytuję: współcześni konserwatywni Żydzi muszą szukać dialektycznej równowagi z wyznawcami innych religii, stając się partnerami w pracy dla wspólnego dobra, jednocześnie starając się zachować granice definiujące naszą żydowską tożsamość. Chociaż oddzielają nas bariery religijne i społeczne od nieżydów, obowiązki etyczne nadal wiążą nas wszystkich razem jako istoty ludzkie stworzone na obraz Boży. Dziś możemy spojrzeć wstecz na 70 lat dogłębnego dialogu żydowsko-chrześcijańskiego, w którym teologia chrześcijańska uzyskała lepsze zrozumienie judaizmu jako religii, Talmudu, literatury rabinicznej, kabały i modlitwy. Należy się odnieść do tego, że teologia chrześcijańska nadal prowadzi dialog ze sobą, jeszcze nie z judaizmem, który istniał równolegle z nią. Żydzi chcieliby jednak być postrzegani przez chrześcijan jako współczesny wyraz żywej wiary, a nie szlachetny, ale starożytny przedrostek chrześcijaństwa, który jest czczony, ale całkowicie martwy. Bardzo Państwu dziękuję za uwagę.
We would now ask Father Adamczyk to switch on his microphone, please. Dziękuję bardzo za te niezwykle interesujące uwagi i wystąpienie. Handing over now to Professor Jan Grossfeld. Thank you very much for your invitation. both Professor Żurek and this original question of who Jews are for Christians, I can provide the earliest of the answers, and one can find it in the writings of Apostle Paul. Jews are enemies of all people, and they are not liked by God. This is a statement which, if when released into the Gentile mentality in which Christianity developed, was subsequently used over centuries in a way which was out of line with the original intention. The Christians of the Jews understood that in the context of the prophetic tradition, for example, whereas history followed in a direction where the stronger Christianity became in the religious world of Europe. It was religious, Europe became religious, but based on fear, and this religious led to acceptance, wide acceptance of the statement as a fundamental state without the context, which, of course, in the history led to horrible and terrible things that we all know about, but no time to mention them. Jews who are against all people and are enemies of all people led to a conclusion that they need to be removed from the face of the earth because they do not allow people to live the way they should. And Hitler felt that very well, because the concept of man, which I will refer to later, in Nazi ideology was quite different to the concept of a human being in Judaism. So what primitive Christianity carried in itself was dissolved and destroyed and reworked into a pagan version of that. And this pagan thinking became prevalent among the Christian masses of Europe, which doesn't mean to say that it was not present in the teaching of the church. It was. And this was clearly visible in the statements made by Professor Etienne Vital, who opened our conference. The evolution that we've seen continued in ever stronger terms, and it led to horrible developments, to Holocaust. It led to a change that slowly bloomed or blossomed, initially weakly, but now very strong in the church itself. Briefly about two other terms that we are aware of. The first one introduced by John Paul II, but we also know that John 23rd also used that term, our elder brothers in faith. I could amend that and say in faith and disbelief as well. So also not just person of faith, but also someone who falls into disbelief, because Christians and Jews are people that are on a certain way that they fail on. Some of them did not even enter that way, and often question that way. Many of them continue or return to that path. But the term here, and I'm interested to understand why Rabbi Shudrich made some statements. For Jews, elder brothers in faith is not good for Jews, because Esau is a morally corrupt brother. which according to Benedict, this does not fit. And the Saint Pope states, and maybe so I have doubts about Esau, because Michael Schudrick said that for Jews, Esau represents Christians. I did not understand that, unless this means idolatry that Rabbi Homolka referred to. And hence, however we refer to Jews, whether fathers or elder brothers or in any other way, we need to understand that this is a family relationship. The more we discover our Jewish roots, the more are we convinced to discover a family from the past, which is no longer current. There is no link or connection, but rather a family that even today is of importance to us, in which we dwell together. And this reminds me of a relationship between a child and a parent. The child, up to a certain point, should be led by the father, but there should be a point in which it should feel free. And Jews also have that clearly, and Christians should follow that as well. Child becomes independent and follows its own path, but it is not treated as a slave of the father, but preserves everything that's best in the relationship: respect, remembrance, and gratefulness. This is something that we miss continually vis-a-vis the Jews. Bernard Schott, this is back in 12th century, formulated a certain statement which referred to the current civilization vis-a-vis their relationship of two ancient times. We are like dwarfs who climb on the shoulders of giants to see more than we can reach with our eyes, and not because of our sharp eyesight or body height, but because we climb up and rise to the heights of giants. And when I mentioned that quote, this among friends, this was raised by, this was quite a surprise among those who were from the Gentiles. This term dwarf may be not very elegant, but without the giant, the Jews, the lowly person remains a pagan, which is unique and special. But if they sit on the shoulders of a giant, they not only draw from the tree, but see further. This is as much as we need to explain. In the second point, I'd like to deal with what we draw from the Jews, and how if they stray away from these, they become pagans more. We see that in church over centuries and even today. Pagan thinking enters the church and has entered the church and has been there and continues to enter the church. This is clearly visible in the letters of Saint Paul addressed to Christians, no one else. And hence, what is so common that brings these two religions together, which if we think that we stray away from the from the community, we become religions as other religions. Christianity and Judaism are not religions as other religions are. What are these common features then? The first point, these religions have a historical dimension. These are the only historical religions. In other words, revelation happened in history, is linked with specific events. These are not religions that were thought up by philosophers at a green table. These are not theories. And forgive me, Christians, they are not even theologies as such, but are built based on historical experience, specific events in which God intervenes in the history of specific peoples, that there is an experience of Shekinah, presence of God among people in their personal life, but also in the communal life. Because the experience of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was primarily individual experience, whereas the experience of the entire peoples is a communal experience. The entire people, when they leave Egypt, they experience things that they experienced when they left their slavery, where they are in positions of threat of life and nearness of death, and God could reveal himself to them, and they could receive that. So the writings are an effect of the experience rather than the other way around. Second point, this is a unique type of monotheism. It's not enough to say that God was one. A pagan can also worship a single God, deals with all things. So it doesn't need to have many specialists. That we don't need, of course, saints who represent this, that, and the other, but this helps us in our prayer. But what is common is that God is near to man. This nearness of God and works for man. Whereas the gods of the pagans of antiquity had to be corrupted, convinced to work in favor of people, whereas the God of Jews and Christians acts for the good of people out of his own volition. And this is something that we tend to forget, that God is close to us in all our experience, even in the most painful of experiences. We say, but better God does not reveal himself in that way. We understand better what is good for us. That's a temptation to fit God into our own thinking or concepts. But God is close to man and acts in their favor. The religiosity is quite different from religiosity of others. Human being is religious because they have fear, they fear death and all the other limiting factors. People say, history cannot go this way, we have to take it into our hands. We don't like it the way God leads us. This is a mentality of common religiosity present in all cultures, Jew, Christian, and every other, also pagans. This is a nature. The experience of Jews and Christians takes us out from this type of religiosity, not once and for all, But if one continues on that way, one continues to be led out of that religiosity. Lech Lecha continues continually of a person, of a family, and the entire community or society. And hence, Paul says, you were brought to boldness by Christ. So it's not fear that moves a person, be it Jew or Christian. It should not be the thing that moves a person, but person is freed by God from it, brought through the Yabok, stream of Yabok, through the Reed Sea, led through Shoah, however fearful and terrible this could have been. And the next common point is that Israel is against idolatry, against idolatry of within its own ranks. Prophets turn to the own people and say, you're doing terrible things, return. If you believe in those idols, you shall die as those idols who are dead. And you will not pass to your they won't be born at all, or if they are born, they will not receive the life. You will pass on to them inheritance of death, rather. The next point, a fundamental point and present and current amongst us, that leads to social conflict, anthropology. A certain concept of man, of a person as well as community. A person is a weak or fragile person. Weak and fragile. They're not someone that through their boldness achieves some bold things and receives medals, wins awards in this life or the next through their effort, but rather they persons who are aware of their fragility and weakness, as the psalmist says, who explains that he feels that God loves me. He loved us when we were yet sinners, when we were enemies, as St. Paul says. God has always loved us. And choices, he continues to love Israel because choices of God are eternal. If he were to take away salvation from Jews, why shouldn't he take it away from pagans, from Gentiles? And hence, there is a certain concept of fragility of a human person. That person is to live in a community and experience presence of God in the community rather than in a isolation, separation. They are to experience the love of God, and that should mean love of man. So it's a community in which God shall reveal himself. This tendency to dominate reality that every person has, be they Christian or Jew, that tendency or proclivity should be, as Christians would say, should be crucified. A person is to be brought to a certain awareness, and this may be unacceptable to our mentality, to feel ourselves lower than others, to believe others better. Someone who does evil, that's quite difficult, but it is great that comes from God. Strength then comes from God, from up above, and Jews have that same experience. that the power comes from above, and hence a fragile person is chosen, weak is chosen, and the sinful is chosen, because they agree that the initiative of God be implemented. And the second important point of anthropology, that God created them male and female, that which is interesting. It's not the male or female that are perceived as good by God, but both are, because they are created in the image of God. There's no room here to discuss this, a beautiful topic, but the reflection of God in life of man and a woman. And not just through life that they grant to the next generation, but living for one another. To this living for the other is unique, because there are not just two ego, but two different sexes. And I'm cutting this short. What brings us together also is the concept of good and evil against gnosis. Christians and Jews recognize that. And if Christians don't know that, they need to turn back to this anti-Gnostic understanding. We accept evil or a presence of evil in the world. We do not eliminate the evil with sword and fire. The only power, we seem to have lost the sound from the speaker. Connection has been lost, probably. Oh. Do you hear, Professor? No, he is not being heard. We've lost connection. We also have a frozen image. I suggest we wait briefly. It's most likely he is trying to reconnect with us, I believe. Professor Jan Grossfeld has joined us again. And do you hear us, Professor? I cannot hear or see him, says one. We're still awaiting for the picture to come up. So apologies, we will try and call him to see what the problem is. Bear with us, please. Unfortunately, Professor left his phone in a different room. If we do not achieve the connection, we will move to the discussion part of this section. I suggest Professor Grossfeld was about to conclude, so I suggest we open discussion as we have 10 minutes for discussion so that we can proceed. So we express our appreciation to Professor Grossfeld for his lecture, and you can ask the question directly. You just need to press the raised hand image, and I will then invite respective people to ask questions. I encourage you to take part in this discussion. Please feel free.
Father Tomasz? Yes? I cannot hear you. Something has happened. Now I have reconnected, but I cannot hear you. And now, can you hear me now? No, unfortunately not. I can hear Professor Grosswell. I can see. Professor, would you like to add anything? Because we are about to start our discussion. Most probably, Professor Grossfeld cannot hear me. Most probably his speakers are switched off. Can you hear me now? Unfortunately not. Can you hear anyone? We can hear you, but he cannot hear us, most probably. Most probably the speakers are turned off. Maybe we could use the chat function, but Professor has logged out at the moment. Anyone who would like to ask a question? We have Rabbi Professor Walter Homolka. You can refer to his very interesting lecture. Hopefully, Professor Jan Grossfeld will reconnect. Professor Kamykowski would like to ask a question. I have a question to Professor Vietor, who talks about the church beginning already with Abraham, but looking at the earliest comments, including Christian comments after the New Testament, at least from Saint Irenaeus, we hear that the church begins, but with the creation of Adam. It is possible to go over because you thank for Abraham, for the prophets suspended throughout humanity, and then through prophets you go to Christ, etc. And in this way, this Israel disappears, so to speak. Some consciously we know Abraham, Yaakov, Moses as the saints of the Old Testament, but the main parallel is between the old Adam and the new Adam, and that comes from the letter to the Romans by Saint Paul. Professor, how can you refer to that? Czy mam odpowiedzieć od razu teraz? Dziękuję. Jest to bardzo dobre pytanie i prawdą jest, że jest ta idea pomiędzy ojcami Kościoła, Ecclesia ad Adele, która zaczyna się od Adama, czy zaczyna się od ludzkości? Od Abla, przepraszam. A więc mamy tutaj zebrane ludy Boże, które tworzą ludzkość i tak powinniśmy do tego podchodzić. Co dzieje się z Abrahamem? Co dzieje się z Chrystusem? Tak naprawdę odnosimy się tutaj do odnowienia przez Boga, a więc mówimy tutaj, zaczynamy od stworzenia ludzkości, a potem mamy konkretne kroki odnowienia, a więc dla chrześcijan Mesjasz, Jezus Chrystus będzie tym ostatnim krokiem odnowienia, które zostanie całkowicie spełnione wraz z powtórnym przyjściem. A więc polega na tym, że w tej wizji chrześcijańskiej zapomnieliśmy o tym kroku odnowienia w Abrahamie. I nawet jeśli chodzi o credo dotyczące choćby tego z Konstantynopola, zaczynamy od stworzenia i wspomina o grzechu, ale zbawienie jest tylko w Jezusie. Wydaje się, że zapominamy o całym procesie zbawienia, który rozpoczął się wraz z Abrahamem i całym ludem Izraela. Nie musimy mówić o wszystkim, ale musimy pamiętać także, że mamy ten krok. Bardzo dziękuję. Thank you very much. Anyone else who would like to ask a question? Please raise your hand in a Teams application. Michał Klinger. Thank you very much. As an Orthodox theologian, I would like to ask a question to Professor Vito, because you referred to theology of Paul, and we know that it's pretty controversial in Jewish-Christian relations. However, do you, Professor, have some thoughts regarding the partition of the Judeo-Christian Church and the Church of Nations, whether the controversy that was such a burden in the first centuries, whether it seems to you as important in this subject that we are discussing today? Thank you very much. Bardzo dziękuję za to pytanie. To jest ogromne pytanie. A więc powiem tylko rzeczy, które oczywiście nie wyrażą się w kwestii subiektywnej. Nie będę słuchał tłumaczenia, równocześnie mówiąc. Myślę, że z jednej strony zbyt dużo odpowiedzialności przerzuciliśmy na Pawła, jeśli chodzi o to rozejście się, ponieważ Paul w dalszym ciągu uważał się za Żyda, nawet faryzeusza, i w większości listów, które wydają się odrzucać prawo mojżeszowe, tak naprawdę są adresowane do nie-Żydów, a więc głównym przesłaniem Pawła nie jest odrzucenie prawa mojżeszowego, ale jego głównym przesłaniem jest to, że nie-Żydzi nie powinni przyjmować prawa mojżeszowego, a więc zbawienie jest w Jezusie i to jest wspólne dla Kościoła judeo-chrześcijańskiego i nie-Żydów, ale myślę, że jest to bardzo jasny moment, kiedy Paul mówi do nie-Żydów, ażeby nie przyjmowali prawa mojżeszowego. A więc myślę, że jeśli chodzi o to stwierdzenia, że Paul jest przeciwny, to, że nałożyliśmy na niego ogromną odpowiedzialność. Drugą rzeczą, którą chciałbym przytoczyć, to jest to, co było największą trudnością, co doprowadziło do tego rozejścia się tych ścieżek. Jest to bardzo skomplikowana sytuacja. Myślę, że nie chodziło tutaj tylko o wiarę, o teologię. Było bardzo wiele powodów politycznych. Cesarstwo rzymskie ponosi ogromną odpowiedzialność, na przykład kiedy nakłada podatki na Żydów, a także judeo-chrześcijańskie wspólnoty, które podpaliły Rzym. Myślę, że jedną z największych trudności było niesienie, relacja Pawła do prawa, ale sam fakt wprowadzania nie-Żydów, myślę, że to było główną trudnością zarówno dla Żydów, a więc, no bo po co Żydzi chcieliby, żeby nie-Żydzi się dołączali, tak? Ale też później, jak profesor Walter Homolka bardzo dobrze to przedstawił, a więc mamy wspólnotę chrześcijańską, która jest wspólnotą nieżydowską i Żydom trudno było tam dołączyć właśnie dlatego, ale oczywiście to pytanie wymaga dużo szerszej odpowiedzi. Thank you very much, Professor, also Rabbi Professor Homolka, as well as Professor Jan Grossfeld, for sharing your thoughts, but also looking after the culture of dialogue. Because we are behind schedule, now I would like to give the floor to the person who is going to run the next session so that we have enough time also for other presentations. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Tomasz Adamczyk for chairing the second session, and now I would like Reverend Professor Andrzej Szostek to chair the next session. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we are behind schedule, nearly 30 minutes, and the title of this panel is Christian-Jewish Dialogue in Pope's Teaching from 1978, from the beginning of St. John Paul II becoming the Pope, all the way to 2020 to today. So these three popes are going to be presented, and I'm going to present the speakers in just a moment. And I would like to mention something banal, but sometimes something that's trivial needs to be reminded of. For Christians, the voice of the Pope, who is the successor of St. Peter, has a special role. This is about listening to the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit in the Church. The Holy Spirit speaks not just through popes, but in our opinion, popes have a special position and importance and right to be treated as representatives of the Church themselves, so to speak, regarding Jewish-Christian dialogue, the political part of this interreligious or ecumenical dialogue, as we can read in the title of today's session. This is why those voices are so important. These three popes are so important, three popes that we have had over the last years. So we are going to start about Christian-Jewish dialogue in the teaching of Pope John Paul II from the John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin. Then Reverend Professor Waldemar Szczerbiński from Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań. He will speak about Christian-Jewish dialogue of Pope Benedict XVI. And then Professor Stanisław Obirek from the University of Warsaw will speak about Christian-Jewish dialogue in the teaching of the current Pope, Pope Francis. And because apart from the presentations, we also have a discussion planned, I will be most obliged if our speakers try to stick to the time regime of 15 to 20 minutes. Otherwise, the delay that we are already experiencing will only grow bigger. We hope to have some discussion after the presentations, and we already thank you in advance for your thoughts. So we are going to start chronologically as per each pope, and we would like Reverend Professor Alfred Wierzbicki to take the floor.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Let me proceed immediately to the context. Text that I used, and hopefully this can fit within the time allotted me. I'd like to turn your attention to John Paul II as a post-conciliar architect of the dialogue between Church and the Jews. This Pope is particularly ascribed the role of having built something that was not there, in other words, of laying foundation. This role of post-conciliar architect of dialogue between Christian Church and Jews was prepared by his biography. This is a biography of a Polish priest. That's not a typical one. And because most of the generation of clergy of Karol Wojtyła either showed indifference to Christian-Jewish relations or, which was even worse, represented anti-Semitic views and attitudes. This anti-Semitism grew out of anti-Judaic theology and was further fueled by the nationalist ideology. And a young inhabitant of Wadowice, student and altar boy, nurtured hidden seed of dialogue in pre-conciliar area before the Church, through Nostra Aetate, opened a new era of mutual relations of both religions, referring to the spiritual heritage of Abraham. Memoirs of John Paul II and his Jewish friend Jerzy Kluge evoke friendship of two students from the same class, which caused mutual interest in their respective religions. This interest in Judaism was taking place in the shadow of Holocaust. Young Karol witnessed a tragic fate of Jews during German occupation of Poland. In Kraków, it was impossible not to notice what was happening in Oświęcim. This reflects the ethical religious significance, as it was the dark seed. Holocaust is the dark seed that gives rise to attitude of a dialogue and calls for break with every form of anti-Semitism, especially built on distorted ideas of religious ideas. The experience of the Nazi extermination of Jews took place only because they were Jews, and this impacted Pope's thinking, and he himself speaks about that in his writings. One cannot overrate his contribution to Jewish Christian dialogue. And this dialogue began with Pope St. John XXIII in the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council. And this happened because he was prepared to teaching a compass that prepared them to move away from contempt toward dialogue. Historians will have much to say about that. When they introduced the so-called Jewish problem to the council deliberation, the good Pope John was guided by his Christian intuition, supported by outstanding moral sensitivity. Pope's decision was a response to the memorandum of Jules Isaac, Jewish historian, who called for development of a new vision of Christian-Jewish relations. The task that John XXIII set before the council was not easy to achieve. One had to deal with the burden of the past. This council rejected the false doctrine that shaped the antagonistic attitude of Christians toward Jews over 20 centuries. And short quote, Jews cannot be presented neither as rejected by God nor as cursed, as it appears supposedly from the Holy Scriptures. Therefore, let everyone take care that the catechists not teach anything that would not be in the truth of the gospel and spirit of Christ. Without forgetting the importance of theology of Judaism, Council first stressed the need for decisive changes in pastoral dimension, pointing to common heritage of Jews and Christians in accordance with attitude of rejection of anti-Semitism and shaping of Christian responsibility for mutual friendly relations. John Paul II assimilated not just what the council did, but also post-consular achievements, particularly the German Catholic Church. When he entered, he could refer to the reflections of the German Church. This is worth bearing in mind, that this German theology helped John Paul II. And in his meeting with the Jewish community of Mainz, he said that he is whoever meets Christ meets Judaism, he said there. And he said that addressed that to all of the church. And this formula shows Judaism as a living heritage, so that Catholics can understand and draw from the depth of its richness. Christian thought was really susceptible to Marcionism, and Marcion, who radically cut New Testament from the Old Testament, dominated thinking in Christian practice. So losing of Jewish roots of Christianity was not just cultural problem. It touches the very essence of Christianity as the religion of incarnation, accepting presence of God in human history. The Jewish identity of the Jesus of Nazareth, due to manifestation of God in history, cannot be eliminated or replaced by any other identity. And the Jewish component of Christianity needs to continue and impact each and every one of its historic developments. So, so the Jewish religion is not external reality, but something internal. The Jewish root, as Paul explained to Romans, has the power of sustenance. And we've heard today a very thorough and in-depth interpretation of this from John Paul II. Deepens this understanding between two religions, and that Jewish religion is not external to us, but something internal. And our relationship to it is different than to any other religion. Brotherhood of Jews and Christians reflects the universal truth of brotherhood of all people, created in the image of God. And because of this brotherhood in faith, it has additional load of kinship. Quote, "You are our beloved brothers," he said in the synagogue of Rome, and we could say our elder brothers, unquote. This is a way of unearthing and strengthening the oft violated brotherhood. And based on human experience, as Professor Grossfeld said, Christianity or Judaism cannot be just brought down to theology or doctrine. Christianity is life. Hence, the second part of my statements is devoted to papal gestures, which I do not treat as secondary, but maybe even more lofty than all his teaching. So I don't want to contrast these two or separate them. The papal meetings with Jewish communities throughout the world, as expressed in the Roman synagogue, a reality and a symbol. These are not just this reality meets a symbol and expresses a reality. And these papal gestures need to be discussed more because they turned out to be prophetic. They brought light and spiritual authenticity in the difficult process of discovering one another by Christians and Jews. These could not erase centuries of hostility, and the Pope used to use the Latin term memoria futuri, the future-oriented memory, which one must not repeat the mistakes and wickedness of the past. What became symbolic was the first visit to the Roman synagogue. Previously, John 23 stopped for a moment in front of this and blessed Jews who were going to prayer on the Sabbath day from his car. The symbolism of this visit was expressed in the fact that for the first time in Rome, Jews and Christians met for common prayer. Papal visit to the Roman synagogue closed symbolically a lengthy period of confrontation. By showing foundation of theological dialogue of both religions, Pope John Paul II acted as a religious reformer who renewed church from within. The March 20th pilgrimage to the Holy Land was also symbolic. This was first official visit of the head of the church in the state of Israel, which was by the way, this pilgrimage in 2000 was indeed a pilgrimage of faith, but also a pilgrimage of peace in one of the most inflammatory places in modern world. It became a symbol of Christian-Jewish religious brotherhood and unique testimony to the tragedy of fate of the Jewish people in the Holocaust. All these dimensions merged in eloquent gestures that characterize this pilgrimage. And let me choose two of them that have come to be remembered and imagination and are continued by the following popes. The silence of Pope in during visit in Yad Vashem. And this Pope repeated in Auschwitz. And initially Pope prepared a speech he was to deliver in Auschwitz. This was drafted, but he decided against that, which was also another gesture that that has entered our relations in a deep way, but also a gesture of prayer for forgiveness of sins before the Western Wall of the Jerusalem temple, or the remains of that, oftentimes referred to as the Wailing Wall. These gestures do not exhaust all of the list of all of his gestures in this relationship, but they complete the teaching important theological statements that the Pope made, formulated, and which he followed as he relied on earlier theologians, but he left that to those theologians. And today's conference is an opportunity to reflect on that. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Father Professor. I know that had he more time, he would have shared with us in greater detail, among others, how deep was the experience of his visit in Auschwitz, something that I remember so distinctly and powerfully. Thank you, Professor, for this brief presentation. We have no more, regrettably, no more time. Apologies, we lost sound. We do not hear the speaker. Apologies, I accidentally switched off. My microphone got switched off.
Thank you very much, Reverend Professor Wierzbicki. Now I would like Reverend Professor Waldemar Szczerbiński from Adam Mickiewicz University from Poznań to present Christian-Jewish dialogue in the teaching of Pope Benedict XVI. Professor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Professor. I would like to greet all of the speakers, guests, and everyone gathered here, but I realized that we do not have much time, and certain things cannot be shown in full. I would like to talk about the teachings of Benedict XVI of Jews and the religion in the context of the continuity or discontinuity in the Christian-Jewish dialogue conducted by the Church. The point is not only a simple presentation of the thoughts of the still living, after all, predecessor of the present Pope Francis, but also showing its specificity in the approach to the issue of dialogue with Jews in Judaism. And I'm just going to choose a few facts, literally a few of them, and but a few of them. Benedict XVI decided to continue this path of dialogue by inviting a Jewish delegation to the to the inauguration of his pontificate on April 24th, 2005. It is also interesting that his first official correspondence as Pope was a letter of congratulations to the already by then retired Chief Rabbi Emeritus of the Great Synagogue of Rome on his 19th birthday. So that means that they must have been in touch before, so it's only natural to send such a letter. A month later, as the successor of St. Peter, Benedict XVI received a delegation from the International Jewish Committee for Interreligious Consultation. And it was during this meeting that he said, quote, "At the beginning of my pontificate, I want to assure you that my predecessors wanted to improve the situation, and I would like to continue to firmly implement this decisive teaching. And this will was also expressed in the synagogue in Cologne, and this is where on this occasion I would like to assure you that I am going to do my utmost to make every effort to continue on the path of improving relations and deepening friendship with the Jewish people, on which Pope John Paul II made decisive steps." This is a very important statement, because a speech given in the synagogue in Cologne also sets new task. However, much remains to be done. We must get to know each other much closer and get to know each other much better. This is why I would like to urge you to a sincere and trust-based dialogue so that we can make progress in the theological assessment of the relationships between Judaism and Christianity. Honesty requires that in this dialogue we do not ignore or belittle our differences. And so with the next meeting on the anniversary of the declaration, there were also important words that were spoken, and it was a summary of what both sides had done till then. In early 2006, Benedict XVI met with the chief rabbi of Rome, and that time really meaningful words were spoken. You are close to the Catholic Church who befriends you. Yes, we love you and we cannot fail to love you for the Father's sake. It is because of them that you are our most dear and beloved brethren. So this is where he calls them the most dear and beloved brethren. So he not only affirms brotherhood in faith, but recognizes it as a brotherhood based on closeness and love. And the previous speaker also mentioned that John Paul II called the Jews elder brothers in faith. Meanwhile, Benedict XVI states that they are not so much elder, but rather beloved and dearest. An unprecedented event was the presence of Benedict XVI in Auschwitz-Birkenau during this pilgrimage to Poland in 2006. Much was spoken, and there were also many gestures that were very important here, but something that I would like to quote is John Paul II was here as a son of the Polish nation. I come here as a son of the German nation, and therefore I must and can repeat after my predecessor. I could not fail to come here. I had to come here. I was, and it is a duty to the truth, to the rights of those who suffered here, a duty to God that I may be here as the successor of John Paul II and as a son of the German people. In his extensive speech, he included words referring directly to the Jews. They were received with many different comments and in different ways, but just a brief excerpt is the authorities of the Third Reich wanted to crush the Jewish nation completely, eliminate it from among the nations of the earth. In fact, ruthless criminals, by annihilating this nation, intended to kill God, who had called Abraham, and by speaking on Mount Sinai, he established the fundamental criteria of humanity's conduct binding forever. However, presenting anti-Semitism in Auschwitz as a threat to the very roots of Christianity is also an indication for the disciples of Jesus Christ to Christians that maintaining such negative attitudes towards Jews and their religion is an indirect blow to one's own faith. As David Rosen rightly pointed out, it is a message of immense pedagogical importance in combating hatred against Jews and Judaism. It seems that this polarity of Benedict XVI in the context of Catholic-Jewish dialogue has its justification and purpose. What was stated in Paris had been preceded by many different such occurrences, and he stated that the Church is against any form of anti-Semitism that has no acceptable theological justification, and to be anti-Semitic is to be anti-Christian. What I have quoted from Benedict XVI are very clear and unambiguous. All the more I would like to emphasize it. We were surprised with the storm that was posed by the fact that the Holy Father removed the excommunication from 4 bishops belonging to the Society of St. Pius X. At the time, the Pope was accused of not only yielding to opponents of the Second Vatican Council, but also of supporting the views of those bishops who do not hide the anti-Semitism. So the words, and I don't want to say that the Pope tried to explain and justify what he had said. Well, his words in the letter said that those fears were ungrounded and the accusation were exaggerated. In this letter dated March 10th, 2009, the Holy Father stresses and emphasizes that the gesture of mercy towards the Lefebvres has turned into its own opposite, an apparent step back in relation to all the gestures of reconciliation between Christians and Jews initiated by the Council, gestures whose acceptance and dissemination had been the aim of my work as a theologian right from the very beginning. The pilgrimage to Israel is one of the most important questions and events during this pontificate. Already at the airport, Belgunion airport, he stated the most important points: to pay tribute to the murdered Jews during the Holocaust, warn against anti-Semitism and all forms of religious and national persecution, meet with religious leaders, encourage a just solution to the Palestinian conflict, and it was important to pray for peace in the Holy Land. That was the most important point. So I should pay tribute to the memory of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Shoah and pray that mankind will never again witness such a great crime. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism continues to raise its level, a disgusting head in many parts of the world. This is absolutely unacceptable. Every effort must be made to combat anti-Semitism wherever it occurs. On January 17, 2010, 24 years after John Paul II's historic visit to the Roman synagogue, Benedict XVI met with the Jewish community in the same synagogue as part of the Day of Judaism. He said, almost 24 years ago, my venerable predecessor, John Paul II, came to you for the first time as a Christian and as Pope. During my pontificate, I have also tried to show you that the people of the covenant are close and dear to me. During the next visit to his homeland in Berlin, he met with the Jewish community. He appealed then that this process of building fraternal relations should not be accompanied by a lack of care for one's own identity. As he stated, quote, "It is clear to all of us that the loving mutual understanding between the Church and Israel should grow further with constant respect for the identity of the other party and should be deeply involved in the proclamation of the faith." And it was a real surprise that Benedict XVI, as Pope Senior, took up his pen and on the pages of the International Theological Review, Communion, published a treatise on Christian-Jewish dialogue entitled Mercy and Vocation Without Appeal. And this was here that the Holy Father, already retired, wrote about the need to refine important paradigms of Jewish-Christian dialogue. In this text, we find a call to reflect on two key concepts: the theory of substitution and the unbroken, unrevoked covenant. As Pope Senior wrote, both theses, that Israel is not replaced by the Church and that the covenant has never been dissolved, revoked, are in principle correct, but nevertheless in many respects inaccurate and need to be further critically rethought. The editor of Communion, Jan Heine Tück, in an interview with the Cuthpress press agency on the 6th of July 2018, he called Benedict's text an explosive material for thought and found it extraordinary that the retired Pope announced that Israel was founded politically and was a consequence of the Holocaust. Michael Böhnke, professor of systemic theology at the University of Wuppertal, attacked Benedict XVI in September 2018 in the issue of the German theological journal Herr der Korrespondenz, accusing him of encouraging Jewish proselytism. Benedict XVI, defending himself against the allegations, once again takes the floor in the text entitled Correction, Not a Mission but a Dialogue. In his message to Herr der Korrespondenz, Benedict XVI described Böhnke's accusation as grotesque nonsense that has nothing to do with what he said. He wrote bluntly, "Therefore, I dismiss Böhnke's article as a wholly false innuendo. The mission mandate is universal with one exception. The mission for not foreseen as was not necessary and was not necessary because they themselves of all nations knew an unknown God. So this mission is important, but the question is how the efforts of this Pope were interpreted in the context of the dialogue that was led by the Church. And the answer to this question is neither easy or unanimous. There are differences not only in the Jewish and the Christian side, but within the Catholic Church itself and the Jewish community as well. And so the statements that sometimes Benedict has a positive attitude and emphasizes the ties. On other occasions, he actually suggests that certain hypotheses should be rediscussed and seen in a different lights. And I could show many different aspects, both on the Jewish side and the Christian side. They are positive and negative parts. So, for example, on the Catholic side, you can read what Father John Pawlikowski mentions. On the question of Jews and Judaism, I judge Benedict XVI as a pope who strongly opposes anti-Semitism and is generally sympathetic to Israel, though no, without some well-founded concerns. According to Father Pawlikowski, for Benedict XVI, just like for Bishop Ratzinger, in such documents as Dominus Jesus, Pawlikowski mentions that this Pope shows that the Church does not see the need to learn anything from Judaism and from this dialogue and from other groups and religious group. Father Pawlikowski especially considers the Pope's remarks about the Holocaust as controversial, especially the speech in Cologne and the statement made at the Birkenau death camp. And during the pontificate, Benedict XVI, right from the beginning, had been compared with John Paul II, and Father Rostowski mentions that we see a lot of continuation. We also see a lot of continuation with the Vatican Council that was taken up and developed by Benedict XVI. Thirdly, when it comes to ecumenism, then we need to look at inter-religious dialogue, and both factors aforementioned give us a very good atmosphere for this. So everything actually is in line with what has been recommended by Nostra Aetate. Regarding the Jewish side, there also is no unanimous understanding, interpreting, or evaluating the participation of Benedict XVI in the dialogue between the Church and the Jews. As part of the discussion around Pocinus' reflections, present here with us today, Rabbi Walter Homolka said explicitly that the retired pope encourages anti-Semitism. I read it, and this is why I quoted here, that the rabbi does not agree with the Pope's belief that Jews are God's people, but the truth lies in Christianity. As Rabbi Homolka argues, describing Judaism in this way helps promote a new Christian anti-Semitism. And Ed Kessler, founder and executive director of the Wolf Institute in Cambridge, was extremely critical of the words of Emeritus Benedict XVI. In the magazine The Tablet, he wrote that he felt rather relieved that this essay had been published after Pope Benedict's retirement. It was published after his retirement. Kessler agrees that for Christians, Kessler admits that Benedict agrees that Judaism plays a positive role in the history of salvation after Christ's coming. Unlike Pope Francis, he rejects the complementarity of Jewish-Christian relations, and not all of the voices are so critical. But for example, David Rosen, in the text in the Jerusalem Post from 2009, he has a much favorable approach to Benedict XVI. I can also add many other aspects, but I would like to conclude by stating that the above-mentioned critical voices regarding the contribution and role of Benedict XVI in the Catholic-Jewish dialogue have shown that while the Pope's activity can be objectively and even scrupulously described within the framework of the dialogue between Judaism and Christianity, an attempt to unequivocally evaluate this activity is in principle impossible. Maybe Father Waldemar Chrostowski, when he emphasizes that in building the relationship of the Church with Jews, one should focus on the religious and theological spheres where the dialogue reveals the identity of the party, and it is to preserve and develop it rather than multiplying concessions and reaching superficial agreements. And looking at the role of Benedict XVI played, I believe that everyone can agree upon certain things, and that came up during this pontificate. I believe that everyone supports the need to develop a Christian theology of Judaism and a Jewish theology of Christianity. Thank you very much for this approach and theology of Pope Benedict XVI.
Before I hand over to the next speaker, Professor Stanisław Obirek, I would just bring two comments. Firstly, there's something symbolic in the fact that this very clear criticism of anti-Semitism is undertaken by two popes, one being a Pole, and there were many Jews in this very country before World War II, and the other one is a German, and Germans carry great responsibility and are accountable for the Holocaust of the Jews. And both of them speak so openly, clearly against anti-Semitism and for dialogue with the Jews. This has its symbolic and deeply symbolic meaning. And second comment, to refer to the final reflections of Professor Szczerbiński, I would underscore the fact that there's something special in the fact that Benedict XVI is a theologian and understands that dialogue is conducted between two sides that do not agree with one another. This would have been a monologue if there was no disagreement. So Benedict XVI clearly underscores, let's call one another as a civil way as possible, but we are not part of the same, but two different religious communities, and needs to be clear benefit of our dialogue. The third speaker is Professor Obirek of Warsaw University, and we know from his many publications, he is very interested in what is happening in the current church, modern church, and expresses this in his critical reflections. And now he will present to us, as we hope, his view on the Christian Jewish relations from the standpoint of Pope Francis. Thank you very much, Professor. My topic is Pope Francis and Jews, a community of spiritual experience. And I thank you, Professor Żurek, for invitation and for sharing with participants of this conference something that is an important completion of what others spoke. We've heard the contribution of John Paul II and Benedict XVI to the dialogue and understanding of the two communities. I'm happy that I participate in this conference. It so happens that this is the time when I have my lectures, and I invited my students to learn how good theology anthropology is about, particularly that's rooted rooted and represented by people in the first line of this dialogue. Let me just give a short introduction, and this has really been articulated for centuries. Leaders of Roman Catholic Church have been perceived as opponents of Judaism and its followers. Difficult to part with such an image because it's been created over centuries using most subtle tools, starting with the sacred texts, foundations of her own identity, and sophisticated theology. She defended herself from contact with the enemy defined in these texts through a system of control and taught thorough isolation. There's been a case for nearly 2,000 years. And here are three main elements of this narrative that are specific interpretation of history. Firstly, the dispersal of Jews as a providential punishment for crucifying Jews. Second, even in the times when he lived and worked, Judaism was in a state of complete decay. And third, that the Jews in all generations are guilty of the crime of deicide. And so it was not simple or obvious even when Holocausts happened. Meetings of charismatic representatives of both religions played a crucial role in exposing unconscious anti-Judaism. First, Jules Isaacs, French historian of Jewish origin, author of basic works on anti-Jewish character of Christianity, and Abraham Joshua Heschel, an American rabbi with Polish roots, author of extremely popular books on Jewish philosophy and theology. The former influenced Pope John the 23rd and the latter Pope Paul the VI, and the Council's declaration of the attitude of Church to non-Christian religions, Nostra Aetate, especially in its section devoted to Judaism. The history of Karol Wojtyła's relationship with Jerzy Kluger, a Jewish friend from his childhood in Wadowice, which Professor Wierzbicki mentioned, is well known, and we do not need to recall it here. However, undeniable this was this relationship alongside the knowledge of Polish history and culture, Wojtyła's religious sensitivity, exceptional openness to themselves. Byron Sherwood, a pupil of Heschel, in his essay entitled Catholic Theology of Judaism in the Teaching of John Paul II, drew attention to the fact that the achievements of the Polish Pope in regards of Jewish-Christian dialogue are truly impressive. It seems that of similar significance is the experience of dialogue with Cardinal Borgolia and Rabbi Abraham Skórka. Now coming on to this book, In Heaven and Earth, it is an exceptional phenomenon for many reasons. This is not just because one of them had 3 years after this first edition was to become a head of the Roman Catholic Church, but the publication that had been a conversation between these two Argentine elders is an extremely intense reflection on the common heritage of Christians and Jews, and the discovery of Jesus of Nazareth by the Jewish side as part of their tradition. This was, by the way, also published or showed by Argentinian television. Both Bergoglio and Skórka were heirs of the breakthrough of the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council. which redefined the relations between Judaism and Christianity. Both interlocutors present their ideas for dialogue in their initial texts. Rabbi Skurka, in his part, points to the need to look closely at one's interlocutor. Quote, true dialogue presupposes that we try to get to know and understand the interlocutor and to define the content of the existence of the thinking man. Unquote. Reading of the whole book makes you aware that this is particular case. It means revising your own ideas about the interlocutor's religious tradition. This is what we heard today, that today's dialogue with Judaism needs to reflect the living synagogue. It cannot be just reading texts of Paul without being aware of the 2,000 of years of history. Similarly, for Bergoglio, it is essential to establish contact with the understanding of the other person. Cardinal refers to a biblical picture of Joseph's recognition of his brothers after years of misunderstandings. Siblings were united by common heritage and a willingness to forget bad experiences. He believes that it is too little there is too little readiness among us and a tendency to focus on what divides us rather than what unites us. Quote, something we identify ourselves more with builders of walls rather than of bridges. There's no embrace, no crying, no question about the father, about the heritage, about roots of homeland. There is no dialogue. I remember that he once said that kasha is a good starting point. In other words, cuisine could be a joining point between Jewish and Christian experience. Shostak mentioned that German and Polish popes are rooted in the real experience of Europe, Holocaust, whereas in Argentina, this sentimental remembrance of the old world is common feature. So this dialogue is born out of respect for the other person, someone who is different from us. And this creates opportunity for entering into a world that is not known to us. So this is a quote from Bergoglio that really shows his relationship to Jews, but also his understanding of dialogue. He says, dialogue is born out of respect for the other, out of the belief that he or she has something valuable to say. Means that at heart we reserve a place for the point of view they represent, opinions, proposals they formulate. Attitude that's characteristic of a dialogue is cordial acceptance, not a priori condemnation. In order to talk, we need to be able to tear down the walls, open doors of the house, and offer human cordiality. End of quote. This is most evident from the contact with someone with different worldview. And quote, when I meet a non-believer, I talk to him about human issues. I do not enter into a relationship with an unbeliever in order to proselytize. I respect him and show myself as I am. As cognition deepens, respect, cordiality, friendship increase. As we shall see, this is not just a rhetoric move. Bergoglio, as a pope as well, assures us that he doesn't hurt anyone, which is not relativism or resignation. It is based on conviction that different attitudes do not preclude joint consideration of issues. Quote, even with an agnostic, with all their doubts, we can look up together and look for transcendence. Everyone prays according to their tradition. What's the problem? Quote, end of quote. Such a conclusion suggests that there should, but the practice looks, generally speaking, quite different. After his election as Pope, Bergoglio had spoken on many occasions about Judaism. Worth mentioning are two interviews conducted by the Italian Jesuit Spadaro in August of the same year when he was elected, which was 2013. Spadaro spoke to Pope Francis, and the next year, following year, in May 2014, he spoke to Abraham Skóra. The interviews referred to the Book of Heaven and Earth. And Bergoglio warned against temptation of certainty. God is always greater than what men can say about him. He mentions a book which speaks of being humble about what we know and think we know about God. He also said we cannot absolutize things that happened in the past. His reference is the God of the Bible, God of Abraham and Moses. And I believe that this is a good reference to what Father Etienne told us in his lecture when he mentioned the rootedness in the patriarchs common to Jews and Christians. And the inadequacy of human condition links the Pope's religious sensitivity to the concepts of religion and God we find in Heschel's books. Heschel in God in Search of Man writes, when faith becomes heritage rather than living source, when religion speaks more in the name of authority than the voice of compassion, its message loses its meaning. Unquote. I look at the time. I believe I still have a moment. I will also refer to some that are interesting because on one hand, it's important to know what popes say and what documents say, as the mentioned Nostra Aetate from the Catholic side, as mentioned by Rabbi Homolka. What is important is to what extent these documents from the heights of Vatican or the rabbinic reflection seep through to the communities. In other words, how documents of Vatican, how they are expressed in through the pulpit. Well, looking at Francis, we have lively and active current responses, where a British rabbi, Debbie Young Summers, in an essay forming part of a book on interreligious dialogue of Pope Francis, interesting book, which presents Jewish response to his latest initiatives in this area, quotes her friend Adam Gregerman, an activist and theologian in St. Joseph's University. According to Gregerman, Francis has many proponents among Jews because they read him as a tolerant and progressive and free of dogmatism. It's interesting that Gregerman imagines a hypothetical situation with a finale, and this is quote, if the Pope were to stand for presidential election, it is very likely that he would have received a large majority from the Jewish vote. That might be treated as funny anecdote, but it's much deeper than it seems at first sight. For most present-day Jews, Pope not only broke with the centuries-old tradition of Catholic anti-Semitism, but we can add here that this happened 50 years ago at the Second Vatican Council and in the theology developed by post-council popes. But we have something more here. It's not only about theology, not just theoretical reflection plane, but a dialogue of life, existential dialogue. The leader of that great community, often perceived as enemy, has become a friend of Jews. And this impression was confirmed by Francis' pilgrimage to the Holy Land. John Paul II, Benedict were in the Holy Land, but Francis also visited Israel in May 2014. Maybe finally, something that's not directly linked with the topic, but it seems to me of importance, because we see that this we see expansion of the plane of dialogue beyond the church, beyond exegesis and theology, exegesis. And let me just mention something that's not been noted in Poland, a certain affinity of Pope Francis and sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. We are dealing here with something very interesting. Two so directly different worlds. On one hand, an atheist or agnostic with a very important period of involvement in communism that he never gave up on. He never gave up on his left-wing views. In his final years, when Bergoglio became the Pope, we note references to Francis' texts by Bauman, particularly when Pope speaks of with care of immigrants and destitute. Among his Italian friends, from my Italian friends, I know that Bauman was invited by the Pope and actually delivered a speech in Assisi, where Pope was present. They also planned, I know from Giuseppe Laterza, that they planned a joint book. This could have been another chapter in the dialogue of Jewish-Christian dialogue, but without doctrinal, but more social discussion. So this is interesting. We are at the beginning of a new chapter that we should write together, I believe. Thank you very much. I also thank Professor very much for this rich presentation of the relations, Christian-Jewish relations under the patronage of the present Pope. And all of the three speakers I like to express my appreciation to for good preparation of their texts, and they were able to keep their presentations to a minimum, which allows us to now enter into discussion. I now open the floor to submission of short questions. I have difficulty with noticing statements. Okay, someone will help. Professor Grossfeld will help me, I understand, in reading those questions. Am I audible? Because previously my microphone didn't work. Thank you very much. I agreed with Professor Żurek that I will say something more, something that I did manage to say. First, two brief comments to what Professor Obirek told us. Jurizak, first impact by Pius the 12th. It was after World War II. He went to Pius and said, "This cannot be continued this way. We need to do something between us, in our relations." And also on the point of relationship with Pope Francis and Zygmunt Bauman, I believe this would not be a Christian dialogue. He was ethnically Jewish, of course, but he never spoke or undertook a dialogue as a Jew. Even the dialogue with the non-religious world is also important, but this is something different. This is just a marginal note. And let me also add something that my microphone didn't allow us. This figure of Jew eternal wanderer. This is a one could say late Middle Ages. This concept comes up that Jews are wanderers around the world as a indeed penalty. There is a specific individual who is devoid of his homeland and has to suffer this, much like the Prometheus. This figure operated in its negative way over centuries. And this concept of Jew, eternal wanderers, can be perceived as something very positive. A Jew who is forced to leave his homeland, to leave, and Lech Lecha continues to be repeated. The words spoken to Abraham: leave the place where you feel safe and comfortable, where you have your religion, your temple, your elders, where you have your children, everything else. Leave out of this and go to a place unknown to you. This dynamism of Lech Lecha led to diaspora, and diaspora led to something very positive. Jews were forced to find a new way of existing and expressing their faith. Christians would say, create a new, we believe in the home or synagogue, in other words, a portable religion, strengthening for the time of being expelled. At the same time, and we do not become like the others, like pagans, like Gentiles. So one thing is the geographical boundaries, also preparedness in purely physical and material ways, preparing for travel. But then there are other borders that the Jews were forced to overcome, and these are the borders of one's mentality. Christians say that the crown of thorns would be a crowning of one's mind. Better not think that way. But we do not understand God and the readiness for continual overcoming of our own thinking, understanding, imaginations about God is something, again, important. Professor Obirek said, or maybe someone else did, Waldemar Szczerbiński, where Benedict was perceived as one with closed vision. Apologies, Professor, I don't want you to interrupt, but we are in the course of a discussion, so I would not like us to lose time and take away time from others. Okay, a question from, just to complete, Professor, briefly. This is a certain challenge that Jews, in how they Jews challenge us to overcome our closed thinking. There is a quote from Father Sadzik, who he quotes or refers to Miłosz's poet's statement. A testimony of a Jew. Between nature and man there is an enmity, because human beings by fact of existence is a challenge to the order of nature. It's the only creature that can say no to continuity, to principles of gravity and similar. What is human and divine is against the God's world, God's nature. The powers of evil continue this duality. We need the Jewish testimony, we as Christians, that we come out of our cursed perception of our condition. Madam Magdalena Tomczak asks to ask the question.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to ask about how it is viewed, but also implemented, and I mean the teaching of the popes, because Professor Obirek mentioned that teaching of the Church of the popes is one thing, but what is preached in churches is something else. We have got all of our Magisterium Ecclesiae, we have got Nostra Aetate and other documents that speak about it as well. I would like to ask the speakers about their perception of introducing this teaching in our country. Can you see progress that it really is happening? Because we have a lot of theological discussions, but I did not have an opportunity to actually get to know this part of Magisterium Ecclesiae, even though I graduated from a good university 10 years ago. So I would like to know what it's like about the incorporation of the Pope's teachings in our country, starting with Professor Alfred Wierzbicki. Thank you very much for this question, because I believe that it reveals something that is very important. There is a certain disproportion between this huge leap, this breakthrough in the teaching of the Church and the reception of this teaching. This is something that actually makes me sad, and I will tell you something from my own biography. For 10 years, I was the pro-rector of the seminary in Lublin. Archbishop Brzeziński really inspired us at the time. And we wanted the new generations of candidates for priesthood to really introduce into the teaching and the practical aspects as well. At the time, Rabbi Homolka, with his students, came over. It was an amazing experience, this meeting, but looking at the fruit of 10 years of work, they are really, really tiny. And I believe it's a question of mentality that is much more durable than the life of the church, because we live in a church of different velocities. I know that this is a sociological expression, but also I heard in Professor Homolka's speech that it is similar with Dabru Amet. This is about Jewish elites. It's about a few dozens, maybe a few hundreds rabbis, but it meets with certain resistance. This shows how much still remains to be done. But unfortunately, and that's the strangest thing, is that it's not just about resistance regarding a breakthrough in the teachings of the church, because when it comes to the teaching about Jews and Christian theology of Judaism, it is not the same as it used to be before the council. We need to do it briefly. Please be brief, says the moderator. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, this is still a mystery. Why in Poland, after the Holocaust, anti-Semitism is so deeply rooted, and this is a shock. This is where our pedagogy actually fails, and it's only going to get worse because we are moving away from the source shock. And unfortunately, my thoughts on the matter are not very optimistic. Well, unfortunately, sometimes your non-optimistic thoughts should be shared, and Professor Szczelbiński would like to share his thought, referring to the question that was asked. I have different remark, not that it's because it's absolutely wonderful and because much has changed in Poland and in the church in general, then I will, not to be too superficial, I will tell you about what my story was like. So what happened throughout my studies, even though we had honorable people with the biblical studies, and there was no subject, I don't know about the will, but I did not hear about Nostra Aetate, and I didn't hear anything about it. And when I heard about it from Jews, from other sources, so then we learned about it later on, but I can see that things are changing. And I don't want to talk about examples that do not refer directly to me, but in my seminary in Gniezno, maybe I was lucky that Archbishop Muszyński, who is one of the pioneers of the dialogues, was one of my teachers, and Archbishop Gondecki, who was my teacher when it comes to the Bible, who is also really involved in the whole process. I learned from them, and it was a day initiative that I, an after all Catholic priest, I was sent to Chicago, there was a college, to write about Heschel. This is where I met a rabbi who came also to our seminary, Sherwin, who came and lectured for us, and also not to get into a void. I myself, as a Catholic priest, have been a chair of an institute for Judaism and the culture of Judaism. And first of all, this was the will of the bishops. They allowed me to do it. And I also believe that 20, 30 years ago, it would have been impossible. We have a monograph also. For many years, we have cooperated with specialists in biblical studies from Gniezno, from Poznań, and also on Judaism, not just the traditional one, but the modern one as well. And there's also a book, What the Catholic Should Know About Judaism. It's not perfect, because for us, for some, it is not enough. For some, it is too much. But these are just, the first swallows that don't make the summer, but what the elites, so to speak, are doing, who are engaged on the level of the church or on the level of universities when it comes to Christian-Jewish relations. I believe that the lack of knowledge is not that because people don't get engaged, involved, and they don't know the teaching of the church, but in general, if we ask average Catholic about the documents of the Second Vatican Council, that people would know about it and could say anything about it. I believe this is a wider problem, not just about Jews or Judaism. So thank you very much for this. And it is also important, and you could say that you've also added a fly into this ointment, but this is important to know what's happening between the church and also Jews and Judaism. And now, Professor Obirek, if I may ask you to take the floor. I'll be brief. I am closer to Professor Wierzbicki's opinion because my experience is pretty exceptional, because until 2005, my experience was inside the church, and it was very negative, because for years I had been friends with Father Stanisław Mosił. I was his supervisor, and so through other brothers in the order and also friends in priesthood, he was treated not very well, I would say. And then from 2005, as a lecturer at state universities, I have been convinced that religious education and what is happening is actually the way it's done at the moment. The church is shooting herself in the knee in the foot, in the leg in general, I would say, because people leave education, they don't know that there is Jewish-Christian dialogue. They're surprised that there are such documents, that the two religions are being brought together. This is still counter-reformation, so to speak, and they don't know about this really important occurrence, about the council, about Nostra Aetate, and simply this knowledge is not passed on. And maybe at the Polish philology or in other areas there is better education, but it is a disaster. We don't know our own tradition. So Professor Grossfeld would like to take the floor, but I would like to mention that this is something that is common to the three of you, that it is our task, that the issue of the dialogue on every level and understanding this reality in the Church of Poland to really start this up. Because even in this optimistic voice of Professor Waldemar Szczerbinski, we also heard that this concerning piece of information, that at the level of consciousness and interest in theology, it is not in a good state here in Poland. And now Professor Grossfeld will take the floor, and then Professor Łukasz Kamykowski will take the floor, and then afterwards we'll need to finish the discussion. So Professor Grossfeld, the floor is yours. I wouldn't limit this lack of knowledge just when it comes to theology, but this is also about the issue or theme of Judaism in general. So generally speaking, within 20 years of teaching about basic of Judaism, my students had no idea about anything. Well, it is connected with the level of students we have at the moment, but it was shocking. They didn't know anything. But I would like to mention the experience of the Day of Judaism in the Catholic Church in Poland. It has been organized for over 20 years. Every year in January, and it is for the church mentality, for the church formation, no matter what word you use to describe it. This Day of Judaism should, in theory, be celebrated in all parishes, and the information that comes from parishes is very clear, that it is practically uncelebrated, not celebrated, not because those priests are anti-Semites. No, simply there is no understanding that the Day of Judaism is actually the day of awareness, of ecclesial awareness. And so the suggestions, the proposals are always in 99% put away into the drawer by the parish priest, because they take the decision. They are single churches in big cities, single churches in smaller towns where it is celebrated. It's a very good question to ask whether they think that it is not important. I believe that that's the main reason. And I can see that Bishop has a very sad face, but this is something that we come across all the time. We have to ensure enough people, because those people are not available locally in any place where we hear that the Day of Judaism is going to be organized in a smaller town. We want to give an award to such a priest, because this is something unusual, and it's Bishop Rafa is smiling at the moment. I just wanted to tell everyone who is hungry, put them at rest, that most of my paper actually has already been mentioned by the speakers. During my presentation will talk about the reception of the situation in the church, and there will be some more time for discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a little bit behind schedule. However, it is not longer than when we were starting this session. Thank you very much to all of the speakers, because we started talking about the relationship between Judaism and Christianity in the light of the teachings of the three most recent popes. I know that in the discussion also those participate who don't take the floor, but they listen. And so I am aware how important this is. And so I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank for all of the voices. And now I will give the floor to the organizers, because I believe something is cooking. Something is cooking. Yes, it is going to be brought to us in front of the computers. Thank you very much. I give the floor to the organizers of the entire event. Father Rector, thank you very much for leading this panel. We are really grateful because we know what your calendar looks like. Thank you for finding the time. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and early afternoon. And also, I would like to add that you will be able to go back to all of those presentations, because our conference is being recorded and it's going to be made available at ecumenislublin.pl. And those who prefer reading to watching, we are getting closer to publishing this scientific volume that is now being prepared based on this conference. And Mikołaj Makowski can bear witness to this, because we already have a preliminary design for the cover. So Mikołaj, please show us that cover. And well, the break is going to be a little bit shorter. In Lublin, we would go to a very good restaurant, but this time we need to manage it on our own. So for just a brief moment, we had the book, and it should be visible now. So as you can see, we are working on the book, and this is the best proof for it. We are working on the texts. They are now being edited. So we hope that within 1 month we will be publishing the book. Thank you very much. It's time for a break, and we are going to reconvene at 3 p.m. See you at 3 p.m. See you at 3 p.m. God bless. Enjoy your lunch.
Hello. Hello. Victoria, please turn off the recordings now.
Słyszy nas pan, panie Mikołaju? Ja oczywiście pana
Dzień
nie
dobry.
słyszę.
Jak pani
Bo
się
mamy-
czuje? Jak jest?
Moment, włączymy tutaj, ale będzie sprzężenie zaraz pewnie. Okej, ja będę pana teraz słyszeć tam, ale też wezmę na